$143,000 to stay quiet. That dozens of people I'd trusted had either participated or looked the other way. Money was just money. Trust was everything, and that was gone. The next 6 weeks settled into a grim routine. Cardiac rehab 3 times a week, improving my physical heart, while my emotional one remained shattered. Meetings with Peter and Jennifer Park, preparing testimony, reviewing evidence, building the case. Security protocols that turned my life into a prison of its own. Inspected food, background-checked visitors, constant vigilance, and calls. So many calls. Business associates, carefully neutral, asking if I'd be returning to Coleman's auto service. Friends, uncomfortable, not knowing what to say. Elizabeth's sister Claire, begging me to drop the charges, insisting Elizabeth would never hurt me, that this was all a misunderstanding. "Claire," I'd said, my patience exhausted, "your sister had toxic levels of digoxin in her house. The FBI found it in a prescription bottle with someone else's name. She had ephedrine hidden in her closet. Dr. Brennan found both substances in my blood at levels that nearly killed me. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is attempted murder." She'd hung up crying. I'd blocked her number. Richard's wife called too. Beth, married to him for 27 years. Mother of his 3 children. "David, please, he's not a bad man. He made a mistake, but he wouldn't hurt anyone. Can't you show mercy? Think of his children." Beth, did Richard think of his children when he forged legal documents to help steal my business? Did he think of them when he participated in a conspiracy that included trying to murder me? My voice was ice. "He's not just a criminal. He's a traitor. And traitors deserve whatever punishment they get." She'd sobbed something incoherent and hung up. No mercy, no compassion, no deals. They'd tried to kill me. Now they'd face consequences. 4 weeks after the arraignment, Jennifer Park called with news. "Elizabeth's attorney wants to make a deal." "No. David, hear me out. She's offering full testimony against Mark. Details about the affair, the planning, how they got the pharmaceuticals, everything. In exchange, we'd reduce attempted murder to conspiracy. She'd still do 20 years minimum, but she'd avoid life without parole. She put poison in my coffee. She smiled at me while planning my death. She doesn't get a deal. If she testifies, we guarantee convictions for everyone. Without her testimony, Mark could potentially walk. His attorney is good. He'll argue that Mark wasn't involved in the poisoning, that it was all Elizabeth, that Mark just took advantage of a financial opportunity. With her testimony, we prove they were partners in everything. I closed my eyes, breathed, thought about justice versus certainty. What about the other charges? The fraud, the offshore accounts, all of it. She pleads guilty to everything. Complete allocution. Admits to all $900,000 in theft. Admits to forging documents. Admits to the poisoning. She gives us Mark on a platter. And Mark, what's his deal? He's not offering one. His attorney thinks they can beat the attempted murder charge. They're going to trial. Then let Elizabeth testify. But I want it in writing. Minimum 20 years. No possibility of early release. Full restitution. And she never contacts me again. Ever. For any reason. We can make that happen. David, this is the right call. With her testimony, Mark gets life without parole. Guaranteed. After she hung up, I sat in my apartment, looking out at the San Diego skyline. Somewhere in federal detention, Elizabeth was making the choice to betray Mark the way she'd betrayed me, testifying against her lover to save herself from life in prison. Poetic justice, maybe. Or just more betrayal in a case built entirely on betrayal. Thomas came home from the grocery store. He'd taken over all shopping, all food preparation, all domestic tasks. My son, 29 years old, putting his life on hold to protect his father from murder attempts. "Elizabeth took a deal," I told him. "She's testifying against Mark." He set down the grocery bags. "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know. Satisfied that she's spending 20 years in prison? Angry that it's not more? Disgusted that she's betraying Mark now after everything they did together?" I shook my head. Maybe all of it. Maybe none of it. I'm just numb. That's trauma, Dad. What they did to you. The theft, the poisoning, all of it. That's severe psychological trauma. You should talk to someone. After the trial. That's months away. You need help now. What I need is to see them convicted. Everything else can wait. But that night, alone in my bedroom, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elizabeth's face. Not the woman in the orange jumpsuit at arraignment. The woman from years ago. Young, beautiful, laughing at something I'd said. The woman I'd fallen in love with at 27. The woman I'd married, built a life with, trusted completely. That woman was dead. Had been dead for years, maybe. Replaced by a stranger who'd smiled at me over poisoned coffee. Which was the real Elizabeth? The young bride or the woman who'd tried to kill me? Or had they always been the same person, and I'd just been too blind to see? 8 weeks after the arraignment, Richard Holmes took a deal too. Full cooperation, testimony against both Elizabeth and Mark, in exchange for 10 years instead of 20. He's the weak link, Jennifer Park explained. His testimony about drafting the forged documents, about Elizabeth and Mark's planning sessions, about the timeline. It corroborates everything. With both Elizabeth and Richard testifying, Mark is finished. What about the death penalty? I asked. Park hesitated. We're not pursuing death penalty. Life without parole is the maximum we're seeking. David, I know you want maximum punishment, but death penalty cases are expensive, lengthy, and uncertain. Life without parole is a guaranteed conviction. Life without parole. Mark Thornton, 48 years old, would die in prison. Never breathe free air again. Never see another sunrise that wasn't through bars. Never touch another woman, build another business, live another day of freedom. It would have to be enough. The trial was scheduled for December, 6 months after the arrests. Christmas in federal court, watching my wife and business partner be convicted of attempting to murder me. Merry Christmas. In October, I returned to Coleman's auto service for the first time since my heart attack. Peter had been managing things through a hired interim CEO, but I needed to see it. Needed to face the place where Mark had stolen from me, where I'd worked myself nearly to death, building something that people I trusted had been systematically robbing. The North County location looked the same. Same sign, same parking lot, same equipment bays. But walking through the door felt like entering a crime scene. Mr. Coleman, Maria Santos, the office manager I'd hired 12 years ago, came around the desk and hugged me. We've been so worried. Are you okay? Are you really okay? I'm here, that's something. She pulled back, her eyes searching my face. What they did to you, what Mr. Thornton did, we had no idea. None of us knew about the offshore accounts, the theft. If we'd known... I know, Maria. I'm not angry at the staff. You were doing your jobs. Mark was the CFO. He had authority to approve payments. How were you supposed to know they were fraudulent? But looking around the office, I wondered how many people had suspected something, how many had seen unusual transactions and looked the other way, how many had been paid to stay quiet. Trust no one. The principle held here, too. I spent 3 hours reviewing files with Maria and the interim CEO. The business was stable, revenues steady, operations normal, but the financial damage was severe. $893,000 stolen. Another $200,000 in legal fees and forensic accounting. Over $1 million total. We'll recover, the interim CEO said. With the asset freezes in place and recovery proceedings, you'll get most of the stolen money back. The business is fundamentally sound, Mr. Coleman. Thornton stole from it, but he didn't destroy it. Small comfort. Driving back to my apartment, I passed the house in La Jolla. The realtor had sold it 3 weeks ago. $1.8 million. Quick sale. Buyers who didn't care about the history. Didn't care that in one of those bedrooms, a woman had planned her husband's murder. That, in that kitchen, she'd made poisoned coffee. They saw a beautiful house with an ocean view. I saw a crime scene. Good riddance. My phone rang. Jennifer Park. David, we need to prep for your testimony. Can you come to the office tomorrow? We're going to do a full mock cross-examination. I want you ready for what Mark's attorney will throw at you. How bad will it be? Stephen Harding is one of the best defense attorneys in California. He'll try to make you look like a paranoid, controlling husband who drove his wife into an affair. He'll suggest you knew about the offshore accounts and approved them. He'll imply that your heart attack was natural and you're using it to destroy people you're angry at. He'll be aggressive, personal, and cruel. Bring it on, David. He's going to attack your character, your marriage, your business practices. He's going to make you relive the worst moments of your life in front of a jury. Are you really ready for that? I thought about Elizabeth crying in her orange jumpsuit, Mark's defiant expression, Richard's broken face. 3 people who'd tried to destroy me, now facing their own destruction. I'm ready, I said. Whatever it takes to convict them, I'm ready. Then I'll see you tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring everything we discussed. Timeline, documents, personal records, anything you remember about your relationship with Elizabeth and your partnership with Mark. We're going to build your testimony from the ground up. That night, I couldn't sleep again. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, with 35 years of memories spread out in front of me. Wedding photos, pictures of the boys as children, Coleman's auto service grand opening, family vacations, Christmas cards, birthday parties. A life that had seemed real but was built on lies. How much of it had been genuine? When had Elizabeth stopped loving me and started planning my death? When had Mark stopped being a friend and started being a thief? Were there signs I'd missed? Red flags I'd ignored? Or had they been that good at pretending? I looked at a photo from our 30th anniversary, 5 years ago. Elizabeth and me at a restaurant in La Jolla, champagne glasses raised, smiling at the camera. She looked happy. I looked happy. Had she been sleeping with Mark then? Had the offshore accounts already existed? Had she already been planning? I'd never know. The truth was buried under years of deception. All I had now were facts, bank records, forensic evidence, testimony, the emotional truth. When the love died, when the betrayal began, when the woman I married became a stranger, that was lost forever. I gathered up the photos, put them back in the box. Evidence for the trial, maybe. Or just memories of a marriage that never really existed. Tomorrow, I'd go to Jennifer Park's office and learn how to testify, how to face Mark's attorney and defend myself against accusations, how to relive the worst period of my life for a jury's benefit. Tomorrow, I'd take another step toward justice, but tonight, I just sat in the darkness of my temporary apartment, mourning a life that had turned out to be a carefully constructed lie, and wondering if I'd ever trust anyone again. Jennifer Park's office was on the 20th floor of a federal building downtown, with windows overlooking San Diego Bay. She'd converted the main conference room into a war room, whiteboards covered with timelines, evidence photos pinned to corkboards, boxes of documents stacked against every wall. "Welcome to trial prep," she said, as I entered with Thomas and Peter. "For the next 3 months, this room is going to be your second home." A woman I didn't recognize stood beside the conference table, 50s, sharp business suit, tablet in hand. She extended her hand as I approached. "Mr. Coleman, I'm Rebecca Walsh. I'm a jury consultant. Miss Park brought me in to help prepare you for testimony." "Jury consultant?" "I study how juries perceive witnesses. Body language, word choice, emotional presentation. My job is to make sure when you testify, the jury sees you as credible, sympathetic, and truthful." She gestured to a chair. "Shall we begin?" The next 4 hours were brutal. Rebecca asked questions while Jennifer played defense attorney, attacking every answer. They recorded everything, played it back, dissected my body language, my tone, my word choices. "When you talk about Elizabeth, your voice goes flat," Rebecca noted, emotionally distant. "The jury needs to see that you loved her, that this betrayal hurt you. Right now you sound like you're reading a grocery list." "She tried to kill me." "How am I supposed to sound?" "Hurt, betrayed, wounded, but still standing." The jury needs to connect with your pain, David. If you come across as cold and calculating, Mark's attorney will use that. He'll paint you as a vindictive husband, destroying his wife because she had an affair. It wasn't just an affair. I know that. You know that. But Stephen Harding is going to try to make the jury forget about the poison and the theft by focusing on the marriage. Controlling husband, distant workaholic, woman who fell for someone who paid attention to her. If you seem emotionless, that narrative works. Jennifer pulled up a document on the screen. "Let's practice the hardest question. David, This is what Harding will ask, probably in the first 10 minutes of cross-examination. I want you to answer it now, and I want to see emotion. She read from the screen, her voice taking on an aggressive edge. Mr. Coleman, isn't it true that you worked 70-hour weeks for years, that you prioritized your business over your wife, that Elizabeth was essentially alone in your marriage while you built your empire? And isn't it true that when she found companionship elsewhere, you decided to destroy her rather than accept any responsibility for the failure of your marriage? My jaw clenched. That's not. Answer the question, Mr. Coleman. Yes or no? Did you work long hours? Yes, but did you prioritize your business? I was building something for our family. Yes or no, Mr. Coleman? Did you prioritize your business over time with your wife? I looked at Jennifer. This was the game. This was how they'd try to break me. Yes, I said quietly. I worked long hours. I prioritized the business. But I did it to provide for our family, to build security. And even if I was a terrible husband, which I wasn't, that doesn't justify theft. It doesn't justify conspiracy. And it sure as hell doesn't justify poisoning me to death. Rebecca made notes. Better. The emotion at the end was good, but you got defensive in the middle. When Harding attacks, you can't defend point by point. Acknowledge the truth. Yes, you worked hard, but immediately pivot to the bigger truth. They stole nearly $1 million and tried to kill you. Don't let him control the narrative. We practiced for another 2 hours. Different questions, different angles of attack. Jennifer was merciless, channeling every aggressive defense tactic she'd ever seen. You gave your son $80,000 5 days before your heart attack. Convenient timing, wasn't it? Almost like you knew something was about to happen and wanted to move assets out of reach of your wife. You claim your wife poisoned you, but the forensic evidence only shows substances in your blood. How do you know she administered them? Could you have taken them accidentally? Could they have been in supplements you bought yourself? You've frozen $893,000 in offshore accounts. Money that belongs partly to your wife under California community property law. Isn't this really about a bitter husband using the legal system to punish his wife for leaving him? Each question was designed to make me look bad. Vindictive, paranoid, controlling. I had to answer each one while maintaining credibility, showing hurt without seeming weak, demonstrating certainty without appearing stubborn. It was exhausting. At 2 o'clock, we broke for lunch. Thomas had brought sandwiches, sealed packages from a known source, inspected by Marcus before leaving the apartment. Paranoia as lifestyle. You're doing well, Peter said, unwrapping his sandwich. The emotion is coming through. You're believable. I'm telling the truth. Why wouldn't I be believable? Because juries are unpredictable, Jennifer said. They're supposed to follow evidence, but they're human. They make emotional judgments. If they like you, they'll want to believe you. If they don't, they'll look for reasons to doubt. She pulled up a chart on her tablet. Jury research shows that victims of spousal betrayal are perceived more sympathetically if they show vulnerability. Not weakness, vulnerability. The difference is subtle, but crucial. Rebecca nodded. When you talk about the marriage, about trusting Elizabeth, I need to see that trust. I need to see that you really believed in the relationship. Right now, you're so guarded that it seems like maybe you always suspected something. But your story is more powerful if you were genuinely blindsided. I was genuinely blindsided. Then show me. Tell me about a moment when you loved her, when you trusted her completely. Make me believe in the marriage before they destroyed it. I set down my sandwich, closed my eyes, thought back through 35 years. Our 10th anniversary, I said slowly. We couldn't afford much. Business was still struggling. Boys were young. Money was tight. But Elizabeth planned this whole day. Picnic at Torrey Pines, watching the sunset. She'd made this photo album, 10 years of us, with notes on every page about memories. Little things. Our first date, the day I proposed, Jason's birth, Thomas learning to walk. Moments I'd forgotten, but she'd remembered. I opened my eyes. Jennifer and Rebecca were both watching intently. She wrote on the last page, 10 years down, 50 to go. I love our life. I love you. I believed her, completely. I thought we had 50 years. My voice cracked slightly. Turns out we had 25 before she started planning my death. Rebecca smiled. That, right there, That's what the jury needs to see. The man who loved his wife and believed in his marriage. Then, when you pivot to the betrayal, the theft, the poisoning, the emotional journey makes sense. You're not a cold, vindictive husband. You're a man who was destroyed by people he trusted. We worked until 6 that evening. By the end, my voice was hoarse, my head pounded, and I felt wrung out emotionally. "Good first day," Jennifer said as we packed up. "We'll do this 3 times a week until trial. By December, you'll be able to handle anything Harding throws at you. 3 times a week, 12 weeks until trial, 36 sessions of reliving the worst period of my life while lawyers dissected my every word and gesture." This was the price of justice. October bled into November. The prep sessions continued. Brutal, exhausting, necessary. I learned to control my emotions, to show vulnerability without weakness, to tell my story in a way that made juries believe. But the sessions took their toll. Every time I talked about Elizabeth, about the marriage, about the day I nearly died, I reopened wounds that hadn't healed, couldn't heal while I was constantly prodding them. Thomas noticed. "Dad, you're not sleeping. You're losing weight. This is destroying you." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're preparing to testify against your wife of 35 years. The woman you loved. That's not fine." We were in my apartment, late evening, the city lights of San Diego glittering below. I'd been staring at prep notes for 3 hours. "What do you want me to do, Thomas? Drop the charges? Let them walk away?" "No. God, no. They deserve prison." He sat across from me. "But you deserve to heal. And you can't heal while you're constantly reliving trauma. After the trial, you keep saying that. After the trial. But Dad, what if the trial breaks you? What if you get justice, but lose yourself in the process?" I looked at my son, 29 years old, wise beyond his years, the only family member who hadn't betrayed me. "I don't know how else to do this," I admitted. "I don't know how to heal while fighting. How to move forward while looking backward. The trial is in 6 weeks. I just need to hold on for 6 more weeks. And then what? The trial could last a month, then sentencing, then appeals. David, this could go on for years. You need to find a way to live your life while the legal system does its thing." He was right. Of course he was right. But I didn't know how. In mid-November, Jennifer called with news. "Mark's attorney filed a motion to suppress your recordings. He's arguing they were obtained illegally, that you didn't have consent to record private conversations." "That's insane! Peter told me the recordings were legal." "They are legal. You were a party to every conversation. California 2-party consent doesn't apply when one party is recording themselves. But Harding is throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. The judge will rule against him, but it delays us. Hearing is next week." The hearing took place in Judge Morrison's courtroom, same room where Elizabeth, Mark, and Richard had been arraigned 5 months ago. But this time only the attorneys were present. The defendants stayed in federal detention. Stephen Harding argued passionately. "Your Honor, Mr. Coleman recorded private conversations with his wife, his business partner, and his brother-in-law without their knowledge or consent. These recordings captured sensitive personal information. Discussions of marital affairs, business matters that should be privileged." "Counselor," Judge Morrison interrupted, "Mr. Coleman recorded conversations to which he was a party. He recorded people who were actively conspiring to defraud him and, as evidence later showed, attempting to murder him. The law is very clear. When someone has reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, recording conversations they participate in is entirely legal. But, Your Honor, at the time of recording, Mr. Coleman didn't know about any criminal activity." "He was suspicious, yes, but suspicion isn't the same as knowledge. Mr. Harding, Mr. Coleman's wife tried to have forged documents notarized while he was unconscious. That happened before the recordings began. He had more than suspicion. He had concrete evidence of fraud. Motion denied." Harding sat down, frustrated. One more delay tactic failed. Jennifer caught my eye and nodded. Another victory. But victories were starting to feel hollow. Each hearing, each ruling, each step toward trial just meant more time in this nightmare. More time preparing, reliving, suffering. I wanted it over. Thanksgiving arrived. Thomas suggested we have dinner together, just the 2 of us. Something normal. Something that wasn't about trials and testimony and betrayal. We cooked in my apartment. Turkey breast, mashed potatoes, green beans. Simple meal, no elaborate preparations. Marcus, the security guard, sat in the hallway, giving us privacy but staying close. "This is the first Thanksgiving without Mom," Thomas said as we ate. "First time it's just us." "I know. Do you miss her? The woman she was before all this. Did I miss her?" The question sat heavy between us. "I miss who I thought she was," I said finally. "But that person never existed, or she stopped existing years ago and I didn't notice. So what am I missing? A memory, an illusion. She wasn't always like this, Dad. When I was growing up, Mom was..." He stopped. "I don't know. Maybe I didn't know her either. Maybe none of us did. Your brother knew. Jason knew what she was doing and took money to stay quiet." Thomas set down his fork. "Have you talked to him since the arrests?" "No, and I won't. He made his choice. He's still my brother. Then you maintain that relationship." "But Thomas, understand? Jason isn't part of my life anymore. He took $143,000 to participate in a conspiracy against me. The fact that he might not have known about the poisoning doesn't erase the fraud. He's dead to me." "That's harsh. It's necessary. People think family means unconditional loyalty. That blood creates obligations. But family is a choice, Thomas. The people who love you, support you, stand by you, that's family. The people who betray you, they're just strangers who happen to share your DNA." We finished dinner in silence. After, Thomas cleaned up while I sat by the window, looking out at the San Diego skyline. My phone buzzed. Email from Jennifer Park. Trial date confirmed. December 12th, 6 weeks from Monday. Final prep session this Friday. Be ready. 6 weeks. 42 days until I sat in a federal courtroom and testified against my wife and business partner. Until I told a jury how they'd stolen nearly $1 million, planned my death, and nearly succeeded. 42 days until justice. Or Judgment Day, depending on your perspective. The final prep sessions were intense. Jennifer brought in a mock jury. 12 people, paid to listen to testimony and provide feedback. I presented my story, answered questions, endured cross-examination, while strangers evaluated my credibility. "He comes across as too controlled," one juror said. "Like he's hiding something. I want to see more emotion." "I believe his story," another said. "But I feel sorry for his wife. 35 years of marriage, working all the time, ignoring her needs. I can understand why she had an affair." Jennifer made notes. "David, that second juror's reaction is exactly what we're fighting. The narrative that Elizabeth was a neglected wife who made mistakes. We need to constantly bring it back to the money, the poison, the conspiracy. Those aren't mistakes. Those are calculated crimes." By the first week of December, I was ready, or as ready as anyone could be, to testify against someone they'd loved for 35 years. Peter handled the business side. Coleman's auto service was recovering. The frozen assets would be recovered fully, minus legal fees. The interim CEO had done well. Revenues were stable. I was considering making the position permanent. I couldn't go back to running the business myself. Too many memories. Too much Mark. "You could sell it," Peter suggested. "Take the money, start fresh somewhere else. California has a lot of bad memories for you now. Running away isn't the same as moving forward. Sometimes running away is exactly what moving forward looks like." I thought about that conversation a lot in those final days before trial. Starting over. New city, new business, new life. Leaving behind San Diego, Coleman's auto service, the house in La Jolla, all the places where Elizabeth and Mark had betrayed me. It was tempting, but first, I had to see them convicted. Had to watch justice be served. Had to know that their crimes had consequences. Then I could think about what came next. December 11th, the night before trial, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about tomorrow. Opening statements, the prosecution's case, evidence, witnesses, and eventually, my testimony. I'd prepared for months. I knew every question Jennifer would ask, every attack Harding would make. I'd practiced my answers until they were second nature. But knowing intellectually what to expect was different from actually doing it. From sitting in a witness box and pointing at Elizabeth, at Mark, and telling a room full of strangers how they'd tried to destroy me. My phone lit up. Text from Thomas. Can't sleep either. Want to talk? I called him. He answered immediately. Nervous? He asked. Terrified. You're going to do great, Dad. You're prepared. You're telling the truth. The jury will believe you. What if they don't? What if Harding convinces them? I'm a vindictive husband. What if Mark walks? Then we appeal. We fight. But Dad, listen to me. You've already won. You survived. They tried to kill you, and you survived. Everything else is just paperwork. Just paperwork. A month-long trial with my life dissected in front of strangers. Elizabeth and Mark's fates hanging in the balance. Nearly $1 million in fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, just paperwork. Thanks, son. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. I tried. Sleep came eventually, thin and troubled. I dreamed of courtrooms and poison, of Elizabeth's face and Mark's calculating expression, of coffee cups and offshore accounts and hospital rooms where monitors beeped, warning that my heart was failing. I woke at 5 a.m., exhausted, but wired. Today was the day. 6 months of preparation, investigation, legal maneuvering, all leading to this: United States versus Coleman, Thornton, and Holmes. Trial, day 1. I showered, dressed in the suit Peter had selected. Conservative, professional, victim, not defendant. At breakfast that Marcus had inspected. Checked my phone, messages from Peter, from Jennifer, from Thomas. All saying the same thing. You're ready. This is it. Let's get justice. At 7:30, Thomas and I left for the courthouse. Marcus drove, watching for anyone following us. Still paranoid, still careful. The media circus had already started. Satellite trucks lined the street outside the federal courthouse. Reporters doing stand-ups for morning news shows. The trial of the decade in San Diego, one said. Wife and business partner accused of attempting to murder successful businessman in elaborate fraud scheme. The trial of the decade. My life reduced to sensational headlines. We entered through the same side entrance we'd used for the arraignment. Through security, up to the courtroom floor. Jennifer Park met us outside the courtroom doors. David, Thomas, good morning. She looked calm, collected, ready for war. The jury was selected yesterday. 6 men, 6 women, ranging in age from 28 to 65. Good mix. 3 of them are small business owners, which helps our case. 2 are retired. 1's a teacher. The rest are various professionals. Smart group. They'll follow the evidence. And the defendants. Being brought up from detention now. They'll be in their seats when you enter. David, are you ready? Was I ready? To face Elizabeth and Mark. To relive the worst 6 months of my life in front of strangers. To fight for justice while cameras recorded everything. I'm ready, I said, because what other choice was there? Jennifer opened the courtroom doors. Then let's begin. I walked into the federal courtroom. Thomas beside me, Peter behind us. The prosecution's table was on the right, the defense tables on the left, 3 of them, 1 for each defendant. Elizabeth sat at the first table with Patricia Valdez. She wore a conservative dress, minimal makeup, her hair pulled back, the image of a respectable woman falsely accused. But I saw the orange jumpsuit underneath the disguise, saw the truth beneath the performance. Mark sat at the second table with Stephen Harding. Expensive suit, confident posture, still playing the successful businessman role, still pretending he was innocent. Richard sat at the third table with his attorney, looking like death, gray-faced, defeated. He'd already taken his deal, but he was required to be present for the trial since he'd be testifying. All 3 of them turned as I entered. Elizabeth's eyes found mine, held them. I saw her mouth move. I'm sorry. Too late for sorry. 6 months too late. I took my seat at the prosecution's table. Jennifer on one side, her co-counsel on the other. Behind us, a few rows back, Thomas sat with Peter. My support system. The people who'd stood by me while everyone else had betrayed me. All rise. Judge Morrison entered. The same judge who'd presided over the arraignment, who'd denied bail, who'd ruled against Mark's motion to suppress. Be seated. We're here for trial in United States versus Coleman, Thornton, and Holmes. Counsel, are we ready to proceed? Jennifer stood. Yes, Your Honor. The United States is ready. The defense attorneys echoed. Ready, Your Honor. Judge Morrison looked at the jury. 12 people who would decide Elizabeth and Mark's fates. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your service. This trial will likely last 3 to 4 weeks. You're about to hear evidence regarding serious allegations, fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. Your job is to listen to the evidence, follow the law, and reach a verdict based solely on what you hear in this courtroom. Do you understand? The jury nodded. Ms. Park, opening statement. Jennifer stood, walked to the lectern facing the jury. She looked at them for a long moment, then began. Good morning. Over the next 4 weeks, you're going to hear a story about betrayal, about greed, about 2 people who conspired to steal nearly $1 million from a man who trusted them completely, a man who'd built a successful business through 40 years of hard work, a man who believed his wife loved him and his business partner was his friend. She paused. Let that sink in. You're going to hear how Elizabeth Coleman and Mark Thornton created offshore companies to hide stolen money, how they forged legal documents to seize control of David Coleman's assets. And most disturbing of all, you're going to hear forensic evidence that they poisoned him, deliberately administered pharmaceuticals designed to trigger a fatal heart attack so they could execute their plan without interference. Several jurors leaned forward, engaged. The evidence in this case is overwhelming. Bank records showing systematic theft over 2 years. Recordings where the defendants admit to their schemes. Expert testimony from a forensic cardiologist, proving that David Coleman's heart attack wasn't natural, but was induced by toxic levels of digoxin and ephedrine. You'll hear testimony from Elizabeth Coleman herself. Yes, she's going to testify, admitting to the affair, the theft, and the poisoning. Jennifer moved closer to the jury box. This isn't a complex case. This is a simple case about 2 people who wanted money and were willing to kill to get it. The evidence will prove, beyond any reasonable doubt, that Elizabeth Coleman and Mark Thornton conspired to murder David Coleman and steal everything he'd built. Thank you. She sat down. The jury looked solemn. Several glanced at me, the victim, sitting quietly at the prosecution's table. Judge Morrison looked at the defense. Mr. Harding, opening statement for Mr. Thornton. Stephen Harding stood, tall, confident, expensive suit. He walked to the jury box, smiled warmly. Ladies and gentlemen, what Ms. Park just described sounds terrible. Murder, conspiracy, theft. If any of that were true, it would be terrible. But here's what she didn't tell you. She didn't tell you about David Coleman, the controlling workaholic who neglected his wife for decades while building his business empire. She didn't tell you about the failing marriage, the emotional distance, the years Elizabeth Coleman spent essentially alone while her husband worked 16-hour days. He paused. Let the jury absorb that. Yes, Elizabeth had an affair. She's not proud of it. She'll testify about it. She'll tell you how lonely she was, how invisible she felt, how Mark Thornton paid attention to her in ways her husband hadn't in years. That's not a crime. That's a human being seeking connection. Several jurors nodded slightly. Jennifer had been right. Some would sympathize with Elizabeth. As for the money, yes, there were offshore accounts, but those accounts were created for legitimate asset protection purposes. Every transaction was documented. Every payment went through proper corporate channels. Mark Thornton was the CFO. He had authority to make those decisions. The prosecution will try to make it sound sinister, but it's just business. Harding walked back toward his table. And the heart attack. David Coleman was a 62-year-old man under enormous stress, working himself into the ground. He had cardiac risk factors, hypertension, high cholesterol, family history. His father died of heart disease at 57. It's tragic that he had a heart attack, but it's not murder. The prosecution will show you forensic evidence, sure, but correlation isn't causation. The presence of substances in his blood doesn't prove who administered them, when or why. He sat down. I clenched my fists under the table. He was good, twisting everything into a narrative where I was the villain and Elizabeth was the victim. Patricia Valdez stood for Elizabeth's opening. Ladies and gentlemen, my client is going to testify. She's going to tell you the truth about her marriage, about the affair, about the mistakes she made. She's going to accept responsibility for the wrong she did. But she's going to tell you one other thing. She never tried to kill her husband. Never. The prosecution has created a theory based on circumstantial evidence and forced confessions. But when you hear the actual evidence, you'll see that Elizabeth Coleman is guilty of betraying her husband's trust, not of attempted murder. She sat. The defense was set. Paint me as a bad husband. Paint Elizabeth as a lonely, neglected wife. Paint Mark as a businessman making legitimate decisions. Muddy the waters enough that the jury doubted the poisoning. It was a good strategy. But Jennifer had better evidence. The United States calls its first witness, Jennifer said, Special Agent Mitchell Weber. Agent Weber took the stand, was sworn in, and began laying out the financial evidence. Offshore accounts, shell companies, systematic theft over 2 years. He presented bank records, corporate filings, transaction histories. It took 3 hours. By lunch, the jury looked overwhelmed by the complexity, but convinced by the documentation. This was how the trial would proceed. Evidence, piece by piece, building an unassailable case. And eventually, I would testify. I would tell my story. And Elizabeth and Mark would face judgment. The war had begun. The trial's first week was methodical, almost clinical. Agent Weber laid out the financial evidence, spreadsheets, bank transfers, corporate structures. The forensic accountant testified for 2 full days, explaining how Mark had created a web of offshore entities specifically designed to hide stolen money. Summit Strategic Solutions, Caribbean Holdings LLC, Pacific Asset Management. All of these companies were registered in jurisdictions with strict privacy laws. The accountant explained, pointing to a chart showing money flowing from Coleman's auto. Service to the Cayman Islands. But they all share 3 things. They were created within a 6-month period. They received regular payments from the defendant's business, and they're all owned by Elizabeth Coleman and Mark Thornton. Harding cross-examined aggressively. But these transactions went through normal corporate channels, correct? Invoices were submitted, payments were approved. Yes, and Mr. Thornton, as CFO, had authority to approve vendor payments. Technically, yes, but the vendors were fake. But you can't prove Mr. Thornton knew they were fake, can you? You can't prove he wasn't simply approving legitimate consulting fees? The accountant hesitated. The pattern of payments suggests deliberate structuring. Suggests, but doesn't prove. Thank you. No further questions. This was the game. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The defense chipped away at certainty, creating just enough doubt. By the end of week 1, the jury had heard financial testimony, establishing that nearly $900,000 had been stolen. But Harding had planted seeds. Maybe it wasn't theft. Maybe it was legitimate business expenses. Maybe Mark was just doing his job. Week 2 brought medical testimony. Dr. Sarah Brennan took the stand. Jennifer walked her through the forensic cardiology analysis step by step. Dr. Brennan, what did you find when you analyzed Mr. Coleman's blood samples from the day of his heart attack? I found toxic levels of 2 substances, digoxin and ephedrine. Digoxin at 3 times therapeutic range. Ephedrine at levels consistent with stimulant abuse. What are these substances used for? Digoxin is a cardiac medication used to treat certain heart conditions. Ephedrine is a stimulant found in some cold medications and, historically, in weight loss supplements. Both are legitimate pharmaceuticals when used properly, and when used improperly. In combination, at the levels I found, they create a perfect storm for cardiac events. Digoxin affects heart rhythm. Ephedrine increases heart rate and blood pressure. Together, in a patient with underlying cardiac risk factors, they can trigger a massive heart attack. Jennifer displayed the toxicology report on the courtroom screens. Mr. Coleman was never prescribed digoxin, correct? Correct. I reviewed his complete medical history. No prescription for digoxin, no medical condition requiring it. So how did it get in his system? Someone administered it to him. Given the blood levels and the metabolism timeline, I estimate he received doses over 3 to 5 days, with a final larger dose the day of his heart attack. How would someone administer these substances? Both can be dissolved in liquids or added to food. Digoxin has a bitter taste but can be masked in coffee or strongly flavored foods. Ephedrine is nearly tasteless in solution. The jury listened, rapt. This was the core of the attempted murder charge, proof that I'd been deliberately poisoned. Harding's cross-examination was brutal. Dr. Brennan, you're a cardiologist, not a toxicologist, correct? I'm a forensic cardiologist specializing in cardiac events with legal implications. I work regularly with toxicologists, but you yourself are not a toxicologist. You can't say with certainty how these substances entered Mr. Coleman's system, can you? The pattern of blood levels indicates deliberate administration. Pattern indicates, but you can't prove it, can you? You can't prove someone gave him these substances versus him taking them accidentally. Perhaps contaminated supplements, perhaps medication error, perhaps he took them himself. Why would he poison himself? I'm asking the questions, doctor. You can't prove deliberate administration by another person, can you? Based on the evidence. Yes or no, doctor? Dr. Brennan's jaw tightened. I cannot prove who physically administered the substances. No, but the pattern is inconsistent with self-administration or accidental exposure. Inconsistent, but not impossible. Thank you, no further questions. I watched the jury. Several looked uncertain now. Harding was good at this, taking solid evidence and making it seem less certain, less clear. This was why trials were unpredictable. The evidence was overwhelming, but human doubt was powerful. Week 2, Day 4, Wednesday, the day I'd been dreading. The United States calls David Coleman. I stood. My legs felt unsteady. Thomas squeezed my shoulder as I passed. Peter nodded encouragement. The walk to the witness stand felt like miles. I was sworn in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And sat down. From the witness box, I could see everyone, the jury to my left, watching intently. Judge Morrison straight ahead, Jennifer at the prosecution table, the 3 defense tables with their attorneys, and Elizabeth sitting at her table, crying silently, looking at me like I was a stranger, like I was the one who'd betrayed her. Good morning, Mr. Coleman, Jennifer began, her voice gentle. I know this is difficult. Take your time with your answers. Thank you. Let's start at the beginning. Tell the jury about your marriage to Elizabeth Coleman. When did you meet? And so I told the story. Meeting Elizabeth at 27, at a business networking event. Dating for 2 years. Proposing at the same beach where we'd had our first real conversation. Getting married in 1989, 35 years ago. Were you happy? Jennifer asked. I thought we were. For a long time, I thought we had a good marriage. Tell the jury about your business. Coleman's Auto Service. I explained how I'd started with one garage in 1983, built it into 3 locations over 40 years, employed 28 people, generated $2.3 million in annual revenue. How I'd worked long hours, sacrificed vacations, poured everything into building something that would last. Why did you work so hard? For my family, to provide security. To build something I could pass on to my sons. My voice caught slightly. I thought I was building a legacy. When did you meet Mark Thornton? 12 years ago. 2012, at a business conference. He was working as a consultant, sharp with numbers. When I needed a CFO, I hired him. Eventually made him a partner with 20% equity. Did you trust him? Completely. I trusted him with my business, my finances, my future. He was more than an employee. He was a friend. Jennifer walked me through the expansion plans, the success of the business, the comfortable life Elizabeth and I had built. Then she shifted. Mr. Coleman, when did you first suspect something was wrong? I took a breath. This was where it got hard. After my heart attack, I woke up in the ICU after 3 days unconscious. My attorney, Peter Jenkins, called and told me Elizabeth had tried to have my will changed while I was dying. That she'd brought forged documents to his office for notarization. How did that make you feel? Confused, then suspicious, then terrified. I looked at the jury. Because if she was trying to change my will while I was unconscious, what else had she been planning? Jennifer displayed documents on the courtroom screens. The forged will, the medical directive, the business transition agreements. Did you recognize these documents? No, I'd never seen them before Peter showed them to me. I never agreed to any of this. What did you do? I hired Peter to investigate. We found the offshore accounts, the systematic theft, the affair between Elizabeth and Mark. I paused. And then Dr. Brennan found the poison in my blood. Tell the jury about the morning of your heart attack. What do you remember? This was it, the critical testimony. I woke up around 6. Elizabeth was already in the kitchen. She brought me coffee, like she did most mornings. 2 cups black. I drank them while I got ready for work. Did the coffee taste unusual? No, it tasted normal. Maybe slightly more bitter than usual, but I thought it was just a strong batch. What else did you consume that day? Oatmeal for breakfast, also made by Elizabeth. Around 10, I got another coffee at Starbucks. For lunch, Mark brought sandwiches from a deli. Turkey club for me. We ate in my office. Who was present when you ate that sandwich? Just Mark and me. We were reviewing expansion plans for the Carlsbad location. What happened next? Around 4:30, I started feeling chest pain. Pressure, like someone sitting on my chest. My left arm felt heavy. I called for Mark. I closed my eyes, remembering. He came to my office. The last thing I clearly remember is his face. He was looking at me with this expression, not worried, calculating, like he was checking to see if something was working. Objection, Harding said. Speculation about Mr. Thornton's state of mind. Sustained. Mr. Coleman, describe what you saw, not what you interpreted. His face was calm. Not panicked like you'd expect if your business partner was having a heart attack. Calm, like he'd been expecting it. Several jurors made notes. Did Mr. Thornton call 911? Yes. He called, I collapsed, and everything went black. I woke up 3 days later in the ICU. Jennifer let that sit for a moment, then continued. Mr. Coleman, did you ever give Elizabeth or Mark permission to create offshore accounts using your business funds? Never. Did you ever give permission to transfer $893,000 to entities in the Cayman Islands? Never. Did you ever take digoxin or ephedrine? Never. I was never prescribed either medication. I never took them recreationally. I never had any reason to take them. So, how did toxic levels of both substances end up in your blood? I looked directly at the jury. Someone put them there. Someone who wanted me dead so they could steal everything I'd built. Jennifer nodded. No further questions, Your Honor. Now came the hard part, cross-examination. Stephen Harding stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and approached the witness box. He smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. Mr. Coleman, you've painted quite a picture. Devoted husband, betrayed by evil wife, trusting business owner, victimized by scheming partner. But let's talk about some things, Ms. Park didn't ask you. Here it came. You worked 70 to 80 hours a week for most of your marriage, didn't you? I worked hard to build the business. Yes or no? 70 to 80 hours a week. Sometimes, yes. You missed family dinners, school events, anniversaries, because you were working. I was providing for my family. Answer the question. You missed family events because of work. Yes. You and Elizabeth hadn't had a real vacation. In how many years? We were busy with the business. How many years, Mr. Coleman? I swallowed. 5, maybe 6. 6 years without a vacation. When's the last time you and Elizabeth went on a date? Just the two of you, no business discussion. I tried to remember. Couldn't. I don't recall exactly. More than a year. 2 years? Probably 2 years. So you worked constantly, neglected your wife, and now you're surprised she sought companionship elsewhere. Harding's voice dripped with contempt. Isn't this really about a controlling husband who couldn't accept that his wife found happiness with someone who actually paid attention to her? Objection, Jennifer said. Argumentative. Sustained. Mr. Harding, ask questions, don't make speeches. Harding smiled. Of course, Your Honor. Mr. Coleman, your son Jason, received $80,000 from you 5 days before your heart attack. Correct? Yes. Why did you give him that money? He said he needed it for a franchise opportunity. But you knew he'd taken money from you before and failed to follow through on business ventures, didn't you? He'd had some struggles, multiple failed businesses, multiple loans you never got repaid, yet you gave him $80,000. Doesn't that seem unusual? Large asset transfer right before a cardiac event. I saw where he was going. I didn't know I was going to have a heart attack. Or did you? You'd been having symptoms for weeks. Chest pain, fatigue. You told multiple people you felt unwell. Maybe you knew something was coming and wanted to move assets out of reach of your wife. That's insane, is it? Or is this whole case your attempt to punish Elizabeth for leaving you? To use the legal system to destroy her because she found someone else? She tried to kill me! You believe that. But where's the proof? You can't prove Elizabeth gave you anything. You can't prove Mark gave you anything. All you have is forensic evidence showing substances in your blood. Substances that could have come from anywhere. They came from my wife and my business partner. You believe that. But belief isn't evidence, Mr. Coleman. You're a controlling man who built a business empire at the expense of your marriage. When your wife found companionship elsewhere, you couldn't handle it. So you're using circumstantial evidence and prosecution power to destroy the woman who dared to leave you. Objection! Jennifer was on her feet. Your Honor, this is a speech, not cross-examination. Sustained. Mr. Harding, last warning. But the damage was done. Several jurors were looking at me differently, skeptically. Harding pressed on. Let's talk about these forged documents. You claim Elizabeth brought documents to your attorney without your knowledge. But isn't it true that you and Elizabeth had discussed updating your will multiple times? She mentioned it, and isn't it true that you'd told her you'd think about it? I said I'd consider updating things, so she wasn't acting without your knowledge. She was following up on discussions you'd already had. Maybe she jumped the gun by going to the attorney while you were hospitalized. But that's not forgery. That's a wife trying to manage affairs during a crisis. She forged my signature. Do you have proof of that? Did anyone see her forge anything? Or are you assuming? I gritted my teeth. Peter Jenkins refused to notarize because I wasn't present. Because of procedure, not because anything was forged. Mr. Coleman, you're spinning a narrative to fit your anger. Yes, your wife had an affair. Yes, there were offshore accounts. Yes, you had a heart attack. But connecting those dots into attempted murder, that's quite a leap. He turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, look at Mr. Coleman, a man who admits he neglected his wife for years, who admits he worked constantly while she was alone, a man whose business partner made legitimate financial decisions he now regrets, a man who had a heart attack. Tragic, but not uncommon for someone with his risk factors. And rather than accepting any responsibility, he's turned his personal failure into a federal case. Objection, Jennifer said again. This is withdrawn. No further questions. Harding sat down. I felt hollowed out, attacked, my entire character dissected and dismissed. Redirect, Ms. Park, Judge Morrison asked. Jennifer stood. Just a few questions, Your Honor. Mr. Coleman, did you ever give anyone permission to poison you? No. Did you ever want to die? No. Did you create those offshore accounts? No. Did you forge those documents? No. Elizabeth and Mark did all of that, and they did it because they wanted my money and I was in the way. Thank you. Nothing further. I stepped down from the witness box, my legs shaking. Thomas met me as I returned to my seat, gripped my arm. You did great, he whispered. But I didn't feel great. I felt exposed, brutalized. Harding had taken my testimony and twisted it into something ugly. Was that how the jury saw me now? A controlling, neglectful husband getting revenge. The trial continued. Week 3 brought Jason to the stand. My older son walked into the courtroom wearing a suit, looking nervous. He didn't meet my eyes as he passed to the witness box. Jennifer questioned him methodically. Mr. Coleman, you received money from your father and from offshore accounts controlled by your mother and Mark Thornton. Tell the jury about that. Jason's $40,000 total. Some directly from Dad, the rest in smaller transfers from accounts Mom controlled. Did you know where the money was coming from? Mom said it was from asset protection accounts. Tax planning stuff. She said Dad knew about it but wanted it kept quiet for business reasons. He finally looked at me. I believed her. I didn't know they were stealing. When did you learn the truth? When Dad confronted me after his heart attack. When the FBI showed me bank records. That's when I realized what Mom and Mark had been doing. Did you know about the poisoning? No. God, no. I knew about the financial stuff. I knew that was wrong. I should have said something, but I never knew they were trying to kill him. Never. Jennifer displayed email records. But you knew about the affair between your mother and Mark Thornton, correct? Yes. For how long? About a year. I saw them together at a restaurant when they didn't know I was there. Confronted Mom about it. She admitted it. Said she and Dad were basically over anyway. Asked me not to say anything. And you didn't? No. He looked at me again, tears in his eyes. I didn't tell him. I should have, but I didn't. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. The words hung in the courtroom. My son apologizing for betraying me. Too late, but apologizing nonetheless. Harding's cross was brief. Mr. Coleman, Jason, you have immunity from prosecution in exchange for your testimony, correct? Yes. So you have every incentive to say what the prosecution wants you to say. I'm telling the truth. A truth that keeps you out of prison. Convenient. No further questions. After Jason left the stand, I felt nothing. My son had betrayed me, was now testifying against his mother to save himself, and I felt nothing but emptiness. Thomas leaned close. He made his choice, Dad. He's living with it now. Week 3, day 4. Elizabeth took the stand. Her attorney, Patricia Valdez, had convinced her that testifying was the only chance, that if the jury heard her story directly, they might show mercy. She wore a simple blue dress, minimal jewelry. Her hair was styled, makeup subtle. She looked like someone's mother, someone's wife, not a would-be murderer. Valdez walked her through the marriage. Mrs. Coleman, tell the jury about your relationship with David. Elizabeth's voice was soft, emotional. We were happy for a long time. Really happy. David worked hard, but I understood. He was building something for us, for our family. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. But over the years, the work consumed him. He was never home. When he was home, he was on his phone or his computer. Always business. I felt invisible. When did you meet Mark Thornton? At a company Christmas party, 3 years ago. We talked. He was charming, attentive. He listened to me in a way David hadn't in years. More tears. I know it was wrong. I know I betrayed my vows. I'm not proud of it. But I was lonely. Several jurors nodded sympathetically. This was what I'd feared. Elizabeth playing the victim. Tell the jury about the offshore accounts. Mark suggested them. He said it was standard asset protection, that successful businesses did it all the time. I didn't understand the details. I trusted him. He said David would eventually be brought into the loop, that we were just setting things up. She looked at the jury earnestly. I didn't know we were stealing. I swear I didn't know. What about the will, the documents you brought to Mr. Jenkins? David and I had talked about updating our estate planning. When he had the heart attack, I panicked. I thought he was going to die. Richard, my brother, he's a lawyer. He said we should have documents ready in case the worst happened. I wasn't trying to steal anything. I was trying to be prepared. It was a good performance. If I didn't know better, I might have believed her. Then Valdez asked the critical question. Mrs. Coleman, did you poison your husband? No. She looked directly at me, tears streaming down her face. David, no. I would never hurt you. Never. I made mistakes. The affair, trusting Mark with the finances, all of that. But I never, ever tried to kill you. I love you. I've always loved you. The courtroom was silent. Several jurors were crying. Jennifer's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Coleman, you testified that you didn't know the offshore accounts were improper, but you're listed as a beneficial owner on 3 different entities. You signed incorporation documents. How can you claim ignorance? Mark handled everything. I just signed what he told me to sign. You signed documents without reading them. I trusted him. You trusted your lover to handle financial matters involving your husband's business, and you never thought that might be problematic. Elizabeth hesitated. It sounds bad when you put it that way. It sounds like conspiracy, Mrs. Coleman. You and Mark created these entities together. You benefited from the stolen money together. You planned what would happen if David died. Together. This wasn't ignorance. This was partnership. Jennifer pulled up bank records. $893,000. You and Mark stole nearly $1 million. Did any of that money benefit you? Some of it might have. Yes or no? Did you benefit financially from the offshore accounts? Yes. Did you use stolen money for personal expenses? Yes. Did you know the money came from your husband's business? Yes. So you weren't ignorant. You were complicit. Elizabeth's composure cracked. I didn't know it was wrong. You didn't think stealing from your husband was wrong. I thought it was asset protection. Asset protection that benefited you and your lover while excluding your husband. Mrs. Coleman, you're an intelligent woman. You understood exactly what you were doing. Jennifer moved closer. Let's talk about the poisoning. Where did you keep your medications in your home? In the bathroom cabinet. And the kitchen. Some vitamins in the kitchen. Did you keep any prescription medications in the kitchen? Elizabeth hesitated. I don't remember. FBI agents searched your home. They found a bottle of digoxin in your kitchen pantry. Prescription made out to someone named Margaret Foster. Who is Margaret Foster? I don't know. She's a hospice patient who died 8 months ago. Somehow her prescription digoxin ended up in your kitchen pantry. How do you explain that? I don't know how it got there. Did you put it there? No! Did Mark put it there? I don't know. But it was in your kitchen. In the same kitchen where you made coffee for your husband every morning. Coffee that contained toxic levels of digoxin. I didn't poison him. Then who did, Mrs. Coleman? Who else had access to your kitchen, to your husband's food, to the coffee you served him every morning? Elizabeth sobbed. I don't know. Maybe Mark. Maybe someone else. I don't know. Or maybe you. Maybe you put digoxin in your husband's coffee because you wanted him dead. No! Jennifer let that hang, then turned away. No further questions. Elizabeth collapsed in her chair, sobbing. The jury looked shaken. The testimony was devastating. Elizabeth had admitted to the affair, to benefiting from stolen money, to signing documents creating offshore entities. The only thing she denied was the poisoning, but the digoxin in her kitchen undermined that denial. Week 4 brought the conclusion. Final witnesses, closing arguments, jury deliberation. Richard Holmes testified, corroborating everything. The planning meetings with Elizabeth and Mark, the forged documents, the timeline. He looked broken doing it, destroying his sister to save himself from a longer sentence. Mark never testified. Harding advised him to stay silent. Fifth Amendment protection. Let the prosecution prove their case without giving them ammunition through cross-examination. Smart strategy, but it made him look guilty. Closing arguments were scheduled for Monday of week 4. Friday evening, I sat in my apartment with Thomas and Peter preparing. The jury's going to deliberate next week, Peter said. Could be fast, could be slow. With this much evidence, I'm guessing fast. What if they acquit? I asked. They won't. The evidence is overwhelming. Elizabeth admitted too much on the stand. The bank records are irrefutable. The forensic evidence is solid. He paused. David, you're going to get justice. This is almost over. Almost over. 4 weeks of testimony, character assassination, emotional torture. Almost over. Thomas ordered dinner, sealed packages, inspected by Marcus. We ate in near silence. What was there to say? We'd done everything we could. Now it was up to 12 strangers. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Elizabeth on the stand. Her tears, her denials, her claims that she'd never tried to hurt me. Had she believed it? After 3 years of planning, 2 years of stealing, months of poisoning, had she convinced herself it wasn't murder? Just business? Just self-preservation? Or did she know exactly what she'd done and simply refuse to admit it? I'd never know. Even if she was convicted, even if she spent 20 years in prison, I'd never know what was in her heart the morning she made me poisoned coffee. And maybe that was the worst part. Not the betrayal itself, but the unknowing, the eternal question mark, where certainty used to be. Monday morning. Closing arguments. Jennifer Park stood before the jury, calm and confident. Ladies and gentlemen, 4 weeks ago I told you this case was simple. 2 people wanted money. They were willing to kill to get it. You've now heard all the evidence, and I believe you'll agree. This is exactly what happened. She walked through the evidence systematically. The offshore accounts, the $893,000, the forged documents, Elizabeth's admission of the affair and complicity in the financial fraud, the digoxin in her kitchen, the toxic levels in David's blood. The defense wants you to believe this is complicated, that maybe David neglected Elizabeth, that maybe the offshore accounts were legitimate, that maybe the poisoning was accidental, but the evidence tells a clear story. Elizabeth Coleman and Mark Thornton conspired to steal David Coleman's money and murder him to cover their tracks. Everything else is noise. She pointed at the defendants. These are not sympathetic figures. These are criminals who calculated every step, who created elaborate structures to hide theft, who administered poison to a man who trusted them, who nearly succeeded. She turned back to the jury. David Coleman survived by chance, because he woke up from his medically induced coma before they could execute their plan, because his attorney called him before they could forge more documents, because forensic science caught their poisoning. But make no mistake, if any of those things had gone differently, David Coleman would be dead, and these 2 would have gotten away with murder. She let that sink in. You have one job. Look at the evidence, follow the law, and deliver justice for a man who nearly lost everything to people he trusted. Thank you. Harding's closing was equally powerful. He painted me as a vindictive husband, Elizabeth as a woman trapped in a loveless marriage, Mark as a businessman who made reasonable decisions that were now being criminalized. The prosecution wants you to believe Elizabeth Coleman is a cold-blooded murderer. Look at her. Does she look like a murderer? She's a woman who made mistakes, who had an affair, who trusted the wrong person with financial decisions. But those aren't capital crimes. He walked the jury through reasonable doubt. Can they prove Elizabeth personally administered poison? No. Can they prove Mark did? No. They have substances in David's blood. That's all. Substances that could have come from anywhere. Contaminated supplements, medical error, even self-administration. You cannot convict on speculation. It was compelling. Even knowing the truth, I could see how a jury might doubt. Patricia Valdez closed for Elizabeth with an appeal to mercy. My client has admitted her mistakes. She's shown remorse. She's accepted responsibility for the fraud. But attempted murder, that requires intent, evil intent. And you've seen no evidence of that. Elizabeth loved David, still loves him. Would she risk everything, her freedom, her relationship with her sons, her life, to kill a man she loved? It makes no sense. The jury got the case Monday afternoon. Judge Morrison read them their instructions. Beyond reasonable doubt, each element of each crime, unanimous verdict required. You may begin deliberations. They filed out. The courtroom emptied. Thomas, Peter, and I went to a conference room the U.S. Attorney's Office had provided for waiting. How long? I asked. Peter shrugged. Hours, days, no way to know. They have a lot to consider. Multiple defendants, multiple charges, complex evidence. We waited. Hours turned into a day. Tuesday passed with no verdict. I stayed in the conference room or my apartment, afraid to go far, afraid to miss the call. Wednesday morning, still no verdict. Peter started to worry. Long deliberation could mean disagreement, could mean someone's holding out. For which side? Could be either. Someone who thinks they're guilty but won't vote for attempted murder. Someone who thinks it's all circumstantial. Hard to say. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. Jennifer Park. We have a verdict. Judge Morrison is reconvening court in 30 minutes. My heart hammered. Already? They've been out for 2.5 days. That's not that long for a case this complex. David, we're about to know. Are you ready? Ready. Was I ready to hear whether Elizabeth and Mark would spend the rest of their lives in prison? Whether justice would be served, or if they'd walk away? I'm ready, I said. We rushed to the courthouse. The media had gotten word. Satellite trucks everywhere, reporters shouting questions as we hurried inside. The courtroom filled quickly. Elizabeth and Mark were brought up from the holding cells. Richard sat in the gallery, required to be present even though his testimony was done. Judge Morrison entered. "Be seated. I understand the jury has reached a verdict." The bailiff nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Bring them in." The jury filed in. I tried to read their faces, tried to see which way they'd ruled, but they were inscrutable. Judge Morrison looked at the foreperson, an older woman who'd been attentive throughout the trial. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor. Please hand the verdict forms to the bailiff." The forms were passed forward. Judge Morrison reviewed them, her face showing nothing. Then she handed them to the clerk. "The clerk will read the verdicts." The courtroom was silent. Elizabeth was crying. Mark sat stone-faced. In the matter of United States versus Elizabeth Marie Coleman, Count 1, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 2, wire fraud. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 3, conspiracy to commit murder. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 4, attempted murder. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Elizabeth collapsed, sobbing. Her attorney held her up. In the matter of United States versus Mark Stephen Thornton, Count 1, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 2, wire fraud. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 3, conspiracy to commit murder. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 4, attempted murder. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Mark's face didn't change. Stone to the end. In the matter of United States versus Richard James Holmes, Count 1, conspiracy to commit fraud. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Count 2, obstruction of justice. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Richard put his head in his hands. Judge Morrison thanked the jury, set sentencing for 6 weeks out, and adjourned. It was over. Guilty on all counts. Elizabeth and Mark would spend the rest of their lives in prison. I stood, my legs weak. Thomas grabbed me, held me up. "You did it, Dad. You got justice. Justice. 4 weeks of trial, months of investigation, a year of hell. But yes, justice." Jennifer Park approached. "Congratulations, David. Complete conviction on all counts. Mark and Elizabeth are looking at life without parole. Richard will probably get 15 years given his deal. You won. Won." It felt less like victory than survival. We left the courthouse through the side entrance, avoiding media. I sat in Peter's car, staring out the window as we drove back to my apartment. "What happens now?" I asked. "Sentencing in 6 weeks," Peter said. "You'll be asked if you want to give a victim impact statement. Then the judge will impose sentences. After that, appeals, but with verdicts this strong, appeals won't succeed. David, this is really over. Over. 35 years of marriage, 12 years of partnership, all of it destroyed. All of it, ending in a federal courtroom, with guilty verdicts and life sentences. That night I sat alone in my apartment. Thomas had gone to get food, and cried. Not tears of victory, tears of mourning, for the life I'd thought I had, for the woman I'd thought I married, for the trust that had been shattered so completely I'd never get it back. The guilty verdicts were justice, but justice didn't heal the wounds. It didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't make me whole again. It was just a verdict, just words on paper. The real work, rebuilding my life from the wreckage, that was still ahead. The 6 weeks between verdict and sentencing were strange, liminal, like living in the space between endings and beginnings. Not quite either. The media frenzy was intense for the first week. San Diego wife convicted of poisoning husband in $1 million fraud scheme ran in every major newspaper. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all covered it. I became a national story. The businessman who survived his wife's murder plot. I refused all interview requests. Let Jennifer Park handle media statements. Let the U.S. Attorney's Office manage the narrative. I was done performing my trauma for public consumption. Coleman's auto service needed attention. The interim CEO had done well, but decisions were backing up. The board wanted direction on the Carlsbad expansion, on Mark's replacement, on the future. I met with them 2 weeks after the verdict. 12 people sitting around a conference table, looking at me with various degrees of sympathy and discomfort. How do you treat someone whose wife just got convicted of trying to murder him? The business is sound, I told them. Revenue is stable. The stolen funds will be recovered through asset forfeiture. Mark's theft hurt us, but it didn't break us. I paused. But I can't run this company anymore. Too many memories. Too much, Mark? Too much everything. The board chairman, Robert Chen, nodded. We understand, David. What are you proposing? Make the interim CEO permanent. Give him a 3-year contract with performance incentives. I'll remain majority owner but step back from operations. I'll attend quarterly board meetings, approve major decisions, but day to day. That's not me anymore. And the Carlsbad expansion? Proceed. The numbers are good. Mark might have been a thief and a would-be murderer, but his financial analysis was sound. Open the 4th location. Hire good people. Build something that lasts. They agreed, unanimously. Relieved, probably, that I wasn't burning everything down in the aftermath of betrayal. After the meeting, Robert walked me to my car. David, how are you really doing? Honestly? I don't know. Some days I feel like I survived something impossible. Other days I feel like I'm still dying, just slowly. I looked at him. My wife tried to kill me, Robert. My own son took money to stay quiet about fraud. My business partner stole nearly $1 million. How am I supposed to be? Angry, hurt, damaged. He squeezed my shoulder. But alive. You're alive, David. That counts for something. Alive, yes. But was survival the same as living? Thomas went back to Oregon 3 weeks after the verdict. His school needed him. His wife missed him. He'd put his life on hold for nearly 7 months. I don't want to leave you alone, he said as he packed. I'm not alone. I have Marcus, Peter, the security system. I'm fine. Dad, you're not fine. You're surviving. That's different. Then maybe surviving is enough for now. He hugged me at the airport. Call me every day, even if it's just to say hi. I need to know you're okay. I will. Thomas, thank you for everything, for staying, for believing me, for being the one person who didn't betray me. His eyes filled with tears. That's what family does, Dad. Real family. Real family. Not the genetic lottery, not the marriage certificate. The people who stayed when things got hard. After he left, the apartment felt emptier. Marcus still sat in the hallway. Peter insisted on maintaining security until after sentencing. But inside, it was just me. Me and the ghosts of 35 years. 4 weeks after the verdict, Jennifer Park called. David, we need to discuss victim impact statements. At sentencing, you'll have the opportunity to address the court before the judge imposes sentences. You can tell Elizabeth and Mark directly how their actions affected you. Do I have to? No, it's optional, but most victims find it cathartic, and it can influence sentencing. Though with convictions this serious, sentences are fairly predetermined. What are they looking at? Elizabeth took a deal, so she's capped at 20 years minimum. But with the guilty verdict on attempted murder, the judge could go higher, could impose life. Mark faces mandatory life without parole, no deal, convicted on all counts including attempted murder. Richard already has his deal, 12 years, reduced from 15 for cooperation. Life without parole for Mark, at least 20 years for Elizabeth. They'd be old when they got out. If they got out. I'll do the victim impact statement, I said. I need to say something. I need them to hear what they did. Good. Write it out. Keep it to 5 minutes or less. Focus on the impact on your life. Emotional, financial, psychological. Don't attack them personally. The judge wants to hear how you were harmed, not why they're terrible people. Over the next 2 weeks, I wrote and rewrote that statement, trying to condense a year of hell into 5 minutes. Trying to explain how it felt to discover that 35 years of marriage had been partially a lie. How it felt to know your own wife had put poison in your morning coffee. How do you compress that kind of pain into paragraphs? The sentencing was scheduled for January 12th, a Tuesday. Cold and gray, unusual for San Diego. The weather matched the occasion. I arrived early with Peter and Marcus. The courthouse was less chaotic than during the trial. Sentencing didn't draw the same media attention. but there were still cameras, still reporters hoping for a statement. Inside, the courtroom filled with familiar faces. Jennifer Park and her team, the defense attorneys. Thomas, who'd flown down the night before. Jason, surprisingly, sitting in the back row. He'd sent me several emails since the verdict, apologizing, begging for a chance to talk. I'd ignored them all, but he was here. Elizabeth's sister, Claire, was there, glaring at me like I was the villain. Elizabeth's elderly mother, confused and crying. Mark's brother, stone-faced. The victims and the families of the guilty, all gathered for judgment. At 9 o'clock, they brought in the defendants. Elizabeth first, in an orange jumpsuit, hands shackled. She'd lost weight in the month since arrest. Looked frail, broken. Our eyes met. She mouthed something. "I'm sorry." Too late. Mark came next. He'd lost some of that polished confidence, but still carried himself with defiance, refusing to be diminished even in defeat. Richard last. He looked like a ghost. Prison had destroyed whatever arrogance he'd once had. Judge Morrison entered. "Be seated. We're here for sentencing in United States versus Coleman, Thornton, and Holmes. I've reviewed the pre-sentence reports, the victim impact materials, and all submissions from counsel. Before I impose sentences, I'll hear from the victim. Mr. Coleman, would you like to make a statement?" I stood. My hands were shaking. I'd practiced this speech a dozen times, but now, facing Elizabeth and Mark, the words felt inadequate. I walked to the lectern facing the judge, Elizabeth and Mark to my left. I set my written statement down but didn't look at it. This needed to come from the heart, not from paper. "Your Honor, my name is David Coleman. I'm 62 years old. For 40 years I built a business from nothing into something successful. For 35 years I was married to Elizabeth Coleman. For 12 years I trusted Mark Thornton as my business partner." I paused, steadying my voice. "I believed I had a good life, a strong marriage, loyal partners. I was wrong." I looked at Elizabeth. She was crying silently. "In June of last year I had a massive heart attack. I nearly died. When I woke up 3 days later, my attorney told me my wife had tried to forge my will while I was unconscious, that she'd been stealing money with my business partner, that she'd been having an affair for 3 years. The courtroom was silent except for Elizabeth's muffled sobs. Then I learned the worst part. Forensic testing showed that someone had poisoned me, had administered drugs designed to trigger a heart attack, had tried to kill me so they could steal everything I'd built. I turned to face Elizabeth and Mark directly. "You took 35 years of trust and destroyed it. You took 12 years of partnership and revealed it was a lie. You took nearly $1 million that I'd earned through honest work, and you tried to take my life." My voice broke slightly. "The financial theft, I'll recover from that. Money is just money. But the betrayal, the knowledge that every morning when you handed me coffee, Elizabeth, you might have been poisoning me. That every lunch you brought me, Mark, might have been contaminated. The knowledge that my own son took money to stay quiet while you planned my death. That kind of damage doesn't heal." I looked back at Judge Morrison. "I don't sleep well anymore. I can't eat food unless someone else has inspected it first. I can't trust anyone because the people I trusted most in the world tried to murder me. My business partner, who I gave equity to, who I treated like family. My wife, who I loved for 35 years, who I built a life with." I gripped the lectern. "You didn't just steal money. You didn't just have an affair. You tried to erase me, to kill me and take what I'd built and move on like I'd never existed. And you nearly succeeded." I turned back to Elizabeth and Mark one final time. "I hope you spend every day of your sentences thinking about what you did. Thinking about how you took trust and turned it into poison. How you took love and turned it into murder. I hope you live long enough to understand the magnitude of your betrayal. And I hope, somewhere in whatever passes for your conscience, you feel a fraction of the pain you caused me." I returned to my seat. The courtroom was silent. Several people were crying. Even Judge Morrison looked affected. "Thank you, Mr. Coleman," she said quietly. "Does anyone else wish to speak before sentencing?" Patricia Valdez stood. "Your Honor, Mrs." Coleman would like to address the court. Elizabeth was helped to her feet by a marshal. She faced the judge, not me. "Your Honor, I know what I did was wrong. The affair, the stealing, all of it. I'm guilty. I accept that. But I swear to you, I swear on my children's lives, I never tried to kill David. Never. The digoxin in my house. I don't know how it got there. Maybe Mark put it there. Maybe someone else. But I didn't poison my husband. She finally looked at me. David, I loved you. I still love you. I made terrible mistakes. I trusted the wrong person. I let Mark convince me that the financial arrangements were legitimate. I was weak and lonely and stupid. But I never wanted you dead. Never! Judge Morrison's expression didn't change. Mrs. Coleman, you were convicted by a jury of attempted murder. They heard all the evidence, including your testimony, and found you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Whether you personally administered the poison or conspired with Mr. Thornton to do so, you're legally responsible for the attempted murder of your husband. Is there anything else? Elizabeth shook her head, sat down. Mr. Thornton, do you wish to address the court? Mark stood. No, Your Honor, defiant to the end. Mr. Holmes. Richard stood, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. To David, to my family, to everyone I hurt. I was wrong. I accept my punishment. He sat. Judge Morrison reviewed her notes for a long moment, then began. I've been a federal judge for 18 years. I've presided over hundreds of criminal cases. Fraud, embezzlement, corruption, violence. But this case stands out for the calculated nature of the betrayal involved. Mr. Coleman trusted you completely, and you used that trust to steal from him and attempt to kill him. She looked at Mark. Mr. Thornton, you were convicted of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted murder. The evidence showed you created elaborate offshore structures to steal $893,000 from your business partner over 2 years. You had an affair with his wife. You participated in administering pharmaceuticals designed to trigger a fatal cardiac event. Your actions were sophisticated, calculated, and showed complete disregard for human life. She paused. The mandatory minimum sentence for attempted murder is life imprisonment. Given the aggravating factors, the breach of trust, the systematic theft, the sophistication of the planning, I see no reason to deviate from that mandatory minimum. Mark Stephen Thornton, I hereby sentence you to life in federal prison, without possibility of parole. You will also pay restitution of $893,000, plus interest to David Coleman. Life without parole. Mark's face remained impassive, but I saw his hands clench. Judge Morrison turned to Elizabeth. Mrs. Coleman, your case is more complex. You took a deal, agreeing to testify in exchange for a sentencing cap. That cap is 20 years minimum. You were also convicted by a jury of attempted murder, which carries a potential life sentence. Elizabeth was crying harder now. Your attorney argues for leniency, points out that you showed remorse, that you testified against your co-conspirator, that you were manipulated by Mr. Thornton. The prosecution argues for the maximum, life imprisonment, for attempting to murder your husband of 35 years. Judge Morrison looked at me, then back at Elizabeth. I've considered all the factors. Your cooperation, your remorse, the complexity of your relationship with Mr. Thornton. But I keep coming back to one fact. You put poison in your husband's coffee. Maybe Mr. Thornton provided the drugs. Maybe he convinced you to do it. But you made the choice to administer potentially lethal substances to a man who trusted you completely. She leaned forward. Elizabeth Coleman, I hereby sentence you to 30 years in federal prison. With the federal system's good time credits, you'll serve approximately 25 years. You will also pay joint restitution with Mr. Thornton of $893,000, plus interest. 30 years. Elizabeth would be 88 years old when released, likely to die in prison. She collapsed, sobbing. Valdez held her as marshals moved to take her back to detention. Mr. Holmes, you took a cooperation agreement and testified truthfully for conspiracy to commit fraud and obstruction of justice. Considering your cooperation, I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison with credit for time served. You will also pay restitution of $50,000 for your role in the conspiracy. Richard nodded, defeated. Judge Morrison looked at all three defendants. What you did to Mr. Coleman was unconscionable. You took trust and turned it into theft. You took love and turned it into attempted murder. You will spend the next decades in federal prison, reflecting on those choices. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. It was over. Marshals led Elizabeth, Mark, and Richard out through the side doors. Elizabeth looked back once, her face streaked with tears, but I didn't meet her eyes. I had nothing more to say to her. Outside the courtroom, Jennifer Park shook my hand. Justice served. Life without parole for Mark. 30 years for Elizabeth. That's about as good as these cases get. Thank you for everything. You did the hard part, David. You survived. You fought. You won. She paused. What will you do now? What would I do now? Thomas approached, hugged me. It's finally over, Dad. Peter joined us. The asset recovery will take a few more months, but you'll get your money back. The business is stable. You're financially secure. He looked at me seriously. You can rebuild now. Actually rebuild, not just survive. Jason appeared, hesitant. Dad, can we talk? I looked at my older son, 32 years old, his face showing the weight of what he'd done, what he'd lost. There's nothing to talk about, Jason. Please, just 5 minutes. Let me explain. Explain what? How you took $143,000 while they stole from me. How you knew about the affair and said nothing. How you watched me work myself into a heart attack while knowing what they were planning. I kept my voice level, cold. You testified because you got immunity, because you didn't want to go to prison, not because you felt guilty, not because you wanted to do the right thing. You saved yourself, Jason. That's all. I'm sorry. I'm sure you are. Sorry you got caught. Sorry you lost your inheritance. Sorry you have to live with what you did. I turned away. Goodbye, Jason. Dad, please. Thomas stepped between us. He said goodbye. Leave him alone. I walked away. Heard Jason calling after me. Heard Thomas telling him to stop. Didn't look back. Some bridges, once burned, stay burned. A week after sentencing, I made a decision. I called a realtor. I want to sell Coleman's auto service. All of it. The business. My equity. Everything. David, are you sure? The business is doing well. I'm sure. It's tainted. Too much Mark. Too much betrayal. Find me a buyer. Someone who'll treat the employees well, who'll maintain the quality. I don't care about maximum price. I care about it going to someone who'll respect what it was supposed to be. She found a buyer within 3 weeks. A regional auto service chain. Reputable. Fair. They offered $2 million, kept all employees, maintained the Coleman's name. It was less than the business was worth, but I didn't care. I signed the papers in early February. 40 years of work transferred in an afternoon. The buyer was grateful, promised to honor the legacy. Legacy. What legacy? A business I'd built with a partner who'd stolen from me. A company named after a wife who'd tried to kill me. Better to let it go. Let someone else make it into something that wasn't tainted by betrayal. With the business sold, the stolen money recovered through asset forfeiture and restitution payments incoming, I was financially secure. More than secure. Wealthy. Money couldn't buy back trust. Couldn't erase trauma. Couldn't make the nightmares stop. But it could buy freedom. I called Thomas. I'm leaving San Diego. Maybe California entirely. Too many memories here. Where will you go? I don't know. Somewhere no one knows my story. Somewhere I can start over. Dad, running away isn't running away. It's running towards something new. Thomas, I can't heal here. Every street, every building, every beach reminds me of what I lost. What I thought I had. I need to start over somewhere without ghosts. He was quiet for a long moment. Okay, but stay in touch. Let me know where you land. And Dad, don't isolate yourself completely. You need people. Even if trust is hard. I'll try. In March, I put the temporary apartment lease in notice, gave away most of my belongings. Kept only what mattered. Photos of Thomas as a child. A few items from my parents. The watch my father gave me before he died. Everything else. The furniture, the clothes, the accumulation of 62 years. I donated. Let someone else use it. I was starting over with almost nothing. Marcus drove me to the airport in late March. We'd become friends over the months of security detail. He shook my hand at departures. Where you headed? Portland, near Thomas and his wife. Figure I should be close to the one family member who didn't betray me. Good choice. Take care of yourself, David. And hey, you survived. Remember that. They tried to destroy you and you're still standing. That's something. It's everything, I agreed. I flew to Portland with 2 suitcases and a checking account containing $3 million. The business sale, the recovered stolen money, my savings. More money than I'd ever need, but no trust. No family, except Thomas. No certainty that I'd ever be able to let someone close again without wondering if they were planning to poison me. The price of survival was higher than I'd thought. Portland was gray and rainy. Perfect. The weather matched my mood. I rented a small house near Thomas's neighborhood. 1 bedroom, simple. I didn't need space, didn't need luxury, just needed somewhere to exist while I figured out how to live again. Thomas and his wife Sarah had me over for dinner once a week. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt something resembling normal. They didn't push, didn't ask invasive questions. Just let me be. I started therapy in April. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, specialist in PTSD and trauma, recommended by Thomas. "What brings you to therapy?" she asked in our first session. "My wife tried to poison me to death. My business partner helped her. My own son took money to stay quiet. They stole nearly $1 million and almost succeeded in killing me. I testified at their trial. They were convicted, and now I don't know how to trust anyone or do anything except survive." She made notes. "That's significant trauma. Multiple betrayals by people you trusted completely. And, how are you coping?" "I'm not. I'm existing. I eat food my son's wife prepares because I know she won't poison me. I live alone. I don't date. I don't make friends. I don't do anything except go through the motions." "What would you like to achieve through therapy?" I thought about that. What did I want? I want to stop seeing Elizabeth's face every time I drink coffee. I want to stop wondering if everyone I meet is planning to betray me. I want to feel something other than numb or terrified. I looked at her. I want to live, not just survive. Is that possible? Yes, it'll take time. It'll be hard. But yes, it's possible. We met twice a week. Slowly, painfully, I started processing what had happened. The betrayal, the fear, the loss of everything I'd thought was real. Dr. Martinez taught me that trust wasn't all or nothing, that I could rebuild it slowly, in small increments with safe people. That being careful wasn't the same as being paranoid. It helped. A little. Enough to keep trying. In June, I got a letter from federal prison. From Elizabeth. I almost threw it away unopened, but a curiosity one. "Dear David, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know you probably hate me. I understand why. What I did was unforgivable. I'm writing because I need you to know something. I never intended for you to die. I know the jury said otherwise. I know you believe I poisoned you. But David, I swear on our son's lives, I didn't know what Mark was doing. He told me the digoxin was for himself, heart medication. I didn't question it. I should have. I should have wondered why he kept it at my house. But I trusted him, the same way you trusted me. I was stupid, weak. I let him manipulate me into the financial fraud. Let him convince me the affair was okay because you were never home. Let him turn me into someone I don't recognize. But I didn't poison you. I couldn't. Despite everything. Despite the affair and the lies. I loved you. I have 30 years to think about what I did. To live with destroying our marriage, our family, your trust. I deserve every day of this sentence. But I needed you to know. I never wanted you dead. Never. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a response. I just needed to say it. Elizabeth. I read the letter 3 times. Looked for lies, for manipulation, for the con. Found only what seemed like genuine remorse. Did I believe her? That she hadn't known about the poisoning? That Mark had acted alone in that part of the conspiracy? Maybe. Maybe not. It didn't really matter. She'd been convicted. She'd admitted to the affair, the theft, the forged documents. Whether she'd personally administered the poison or just looked the other way while Mark did, she was guilty. I burned the letter. Didn't respond. What was there to say? Summer passed. I started volunteering at a community center, teaching small business skills, using what I'd learned over 40 years to help people who were trying to build something honest. It felt good, purposeful, like maybe I could create something positive from the wreckage. In September, I went on a date. A woman named Linda, 60 years old, divorced, kind eyes. We met at a coffee shop. My therapist's suggestion, Exposure therapy for the coffee trauma. I ordered coffee, drank it, didn't die. Small victories. Linda and I talked for 2 hours about her divorce, about her grown children, about starting over in your 60s. I told her I was also divorced, that it had been difficult, that I was rebuilding. I didn't tell her about the poisoning, the trial, the convictions. Not yet, maybe never. Some stories were too heavy for first dates. We went on a second date, then a third. Slowly, carefully, I started to believe that maybe I could connect with someone again without assuming betrayal. It was terrifying, but also hopeful. In November, almost exactly 18 months after my heart attack, I got a call from Jennifer Park. "David, I wanted you to hear this from me. Mark Thornton died in prison." My hand tightened on the phone. "How?" "Another inmate. Stabbing during a fight. Mark was involved in some kind of contraband scheme. Power plays are common in prison. Someone took offense. Dead. Mark was dead. The man who'd stolen from me, slept with my wife, tried to kill me. Dead at 49. How do I feel?" I asked Jennifer. "That's up to you." I hung up and sat with the news. Tried to find satisfaction, vindication, justice. Found only emptiness. Mark was dead. Elizabeth was in prison. Richard was in prison. Jason was alive but dead to me. 35 years of marriage erased. 12 years of partnership revealed as lies. And I was here, alive, in Portland, slowly rebuilding. The people who tried to destroy me were destroyed instead. Some by the legal system, some by prison violence, all by their own choices. I should have felt something. Victory, closure, relief. Instead, I just felt tired. December arrived. 1 year since the trial. I made dinner with Thomas and Sarah. A small tradition we'd started. Nothing fancy, just family. "How are you doing, Dad?" Thomas asked as we cleaned up. "Better. Not healed, but better. The therapy helps." "Linda helps." "Yes, I'm seeing someone. Don't make a big deal of it. The volunteering helps. Time helps." "Do you think about them, Mom, Mark?" "Every day, but less intensely. They're becoming history instead of open wounds." I dried a plate, set it in the cabinet. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust anyone the way I trusted them. Maybe that's okay. Maybe being careful isn't the same as being broken. "You're not broken, Dad. You're healing. That's different." Healing, was I? I thought about the nightmares, less frequent now. About the hypervigilance around food, still there but manageable. About the ability to have coffee with Linda without assuming it was poisoned. Progress. Maybe healing wasn't a destination. Maybe it was just the sum of small improvements. Nightmares 3 times a week instead of 7. Trusting one person, then 2. Drinking coffee, going on dates, living instead of just surviving. "Yeah," I said. "I guess I am healing." That night, alone in my small house, I looked at the photo on my mantel. Thomas at his college graduation. The one untainted memory. The one relationship that hadn't betrayed me. I'd lost almost everything. My wife, my business, my partner, my older son, 35 years of trust. But I'd survived. Against all odds, against poison and conspiracy and betrayal, I'd survived. And slowly, painfully, I was learning to live again. That would have to be enough. 5 years. That's how long it's been since the morning I woke up in an ICU with tubes down my throat and my attorney warning me that my wife had tried to change my will while I was dying. 5 years since I discovered that 35 years of marriage had been partially a lie. Since I learned that the people I trusted most had been systematically stealing from me, planning my death, administering poison in my morning coffee. 5 years since everything I thought was real turned out to be an elaborate construction of lies. I'm 67 now, living in a craftsman-style house in Portland's Laurelhurst neighborhood, 3 blocks from Thomas and Sarah and their 2 children. My grandchildren, born 3 and 4 years ago. Emma and Jackson, 5 and 4 years old. Too young to understand what their grandmother did, old enough to know that Grandpa David loves them fiercely and would do anything to protect them. The house is modest by San Diego standards, but it's mine. Really mine. No ghosts. No memories of Elizabeth making coffee that might have been poisoned. No echoes of Mark's voice discussing business while planning my murder. Just a house where I live, where Linda stays over sometimes. where Thomas and his family come for Sunday dinners, where I've built something resembling a normal life from the wreckage of the old one. This morning I made coffee, real coffee, from beans I ground myself, brewed in a machine I bought. No one else touched it. No one else prepared it. 5 years ago, I couldn't do that. Couldn't make my own coffee without seeing Elizabeth's face, without wondering if this cup would be the one that stopped my heart. Now I can. Most mornings anyway. Some days are harder than others. I sat on my back porch with that coffee, watching rain fall on the garden Linda helped me plant last spring. Tomatoes, herbs, flowers, things that grow when you take care of them. Things that don't betray you if you water them and give them sunlight. Simple metaphor, but after what I've been through, I appreciate simple. My phone buzzed. Text from Thomas. Dad, can you watch the kids tomorrow afternoon? Sarah has a doctor's appointment. Of course. Bring them by whenever. Grandchildren. The gift I never expected. Thomas had waited to have children, partly because of his career, partly because of what happened with our family. But 3 years ago, he and Sarah decided they were ready. Emma was born in the spring. Jackson followed 16 months later. And suddenly I had a reason to keep healing that went beyond just myself, because I wanted to be present for them. Wanted to be the grandfather who showed up, who told stories, who taught them things. Not the broken man who could barely function, who flinched at every cup of coffee, who couldn't trust anyone. Children force you to be better than you are. They deserve your best self, not your traumatized self. So I kept going to therapy, kept taking the medications for my heart, kept doing the work of rebuilding trust, rebuilding life, rebuilding David Coleman into someone who could love again without constant fear. Dr. Martinez and I still meet monthly, down from twice a week in the early years, but she says I'll probably always need check-ins. PTSD doesn't fully go away. You just learn to manage it. How are the nightmares? She'd asked in our last session. Once or twice a month now. Down from nightly. I'd call that progress. And trust. How's that developing? I'd thought about that question. I trust Thomas and Sarah completely. I trust Linda mostly, working on that last 10%. I trust my neighbors enough to water my plants when I'm gone. I trust the barista at my coffee shop, not to poison me. I'd smiled slightly. That last one's bigger than it sounds. It is. 5 years ago, you couldn't drink coffee made by anyone except Thomas. Now you're ordering from strangers. That's significant healing. Significant healing, not complete healing. Never complete healing. But enough to live, to function, to connect with people. Enough. Linda and I have been together for 3 years now. We met through volunteering. She teaches literacy at the same community center where I teach small business skills. She's 63, divorced, for 10 years after her husband had an affair. Different trauma than mine, but she understood betrayal, understood the difficulty of trusting again. We took it slow, painfully slow. 6 months before, I told her about Elizabeth and the poisoning. Another 6 months before I felt comfortable eating food she prepared. A year before I could sleep beside her without nightmares. But we got there, not perfectly. I still have bad days when I'm distant and closed off. She still has moments when she assumes I'm lying about something, because her ex-husband lied about everything. But we're both trying, both committed to building something honest. Last month she moved in, her toothbrush in my bathroom, her clothes in my closet, her laughter in my living room. Small domestic intimacies that once felt impossible. You're sure about this? I'd asked as she unpacked. David, I've watched you rebuild yourself over 3 years. I've seen you go from someone who could barely function to someone who's genuinely present and alive. Yes, you have trauma. Yes, you have hard days. But you're also kind, honest, and trying your best. That's all anyone can ask. Kind, honest, trying my best. After everything that had been taken from me, those qualities remained. Elizabeth and Mark couldn't steal those. The betrayal couldn't erase them. Maybe that was the real victory. I sold Coleman's auto service 5 years ago, but I stayed in touch with the new owners. They'd maintained the quality, kept the employees, honored what the business was supposed to be. Last year they asked if I'd consider being a consultant, not active management, just quarterly visits, strategic advice, mentorship for young mechanics. Using my 40 years of experience without the daily grind. I said yes. It felt good to contribute again, to take what I'd built, what Mark had tainted but not destroyed, and help it continue. 3 times a year, I fly to San Diego for a week, stay in a hotel near the coast, visit the shops, meet with the team. It's strange being back in the city where everything happened, but also healing, reclaiming space that once held only pain. I don't visit the old house in La Jolla. That's gone, sold years ago, occupied by a family who knows nothing about the woman who poisoned her husband in that kitchen. Let them have it. Let it be just a house again. I don't visit the courthouse where I testified. Don't need to relive that. But I do visit the hospital where I woke up after my heart attack, where Peter called me with the first warning, where everything started to unravel, and eventually where I started to understand the truth. I bring coffee to the ICU nurses. A small thank you to people who kept me alive while my wife and business partner hoped I'd die. They don't remember me. Too many patients. Too many years. But I remember them. The woman who held my hand when I was confused and scared. The doctor who explained what had happened to my heart. The staff who protected me once I requested security. They saved my life by doing their jobs. I wanted them to know it mattered. Jason tried to contact me twice in the first 3 years. Emails, letters, messages through Thomas, all saying the same thing. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please give me a chance. I didn't respond. Thomas said that was harsh, that Jason had been manipulated by Elizabeth, that he deserved forgiveness. Maybe Jason had been a victim of his mother's manipulation. Maybe he genuinely regretted taking that money and staying silent. But some bridges stay burned. Some betrayals are too fundamental to repair. Jason was 37 now, living in Arizona, working in real estate, trying to rebuild his life after being publicly associated with a federal fraud, an attempted murder case. His name had been in all the media coverage. His immunity deal was public record. Everyone knew he'd taken money and stayed quiet while his mother stole from his father. That was his consequence. Not prison, but reputation, social exile, the knowledge that he'd chosen money over his father's life. I didn't need to punish him further. The world was doing that, but I didn't need to forgive him either. Thomas maintained a relationship with his brother, thin, careful, but present. That was his choice. I didn't interfere, but Jason wasn't my son anymore. That relationship died the day I learned he'd taken $143,000 to stay quiet about fraud. Some deaths are permanent. Elizabeth was in FCI Victorville, a medium-security federal prison in California. 58 years old, serving year 5 of a 30-year sentence. She'd be 83 when released. If she lived that long, she wrote occasionally. Letters I rarely read. Always the same themes: regret, apology, insistence that she hadn't known about the poisoning, claims that Mark had manipulated her. Maybe that was true. Maybe Mark had been the mastermind and Elizabeth had been a pawn. Or maybe they'd been equal partners and she was rewriting history to preserve her self-image. I'd never know for certain. Last year she wrote asking if I'd visit, if we could talk face to face about what had happened. She said she needed closure. I didn't respond. Her need for closure wasn't my responsibility. I'd gotten my closure at the sentencing hearing, when the judge imposed 30 years and Elizabeth collapsed crying. When I walked out of that courthouse, knowing she'd never hurt me again. That was all the closure I needed. Mark was dead, killed in prison 4 years ago, during a fight over contraband cigarettes. I'd felt nothing when Jennifer called with the news. No satisfaction, no grief. Just acknowledgement that he'd made choices and those choices had consequences. He'd died at 49, 40 years younger than he should have lived if he hadn't tried to kill me for money. Natural consequences of unnatural choices. Richard Holmes was in FCI Sheridan in Oregon, coincidentally just 2 hours from Portland, serving year 5 of a 12-year sentence. He'd be released in 7 years at 68. He'd never written, never tried to contact me. I appreciated that. Richard had been the weakest link in the conspiracy, pulled in by his sister, probably never understanding the full scope of what they were doing. But he'd participated. He'd forged documents. He'd known they were wrong and done it anyway. 7 more years seemed fair. This afternoon, I picked up Emma and Jackson from Thomas's house. They ran to my car, backpacks bouncing, shouting, "Grandpa," with the uncomplicated joy of children who don't yet know how cruel the world can be. "What are we doing today, Grandpa?" Emma asked as I buckled her into her car seat. "I thought we'd go to the park, then get ice cream. Sound good?" "Yes." Both of them in unison. Simple pleasures. Park, ice cream, grandchildren's laughter. 5 years ago, these things seemed impossible. The idea that I'd ever feel joy again, ever trust anyone enough to be around children, ever build a life worth living, all of it seemed unreachable. But here I was, at the park, pushing Jackson on a swing while Emma climbed the jungle gym, watching them play, knowing they were safe, knowing I was present and capable of caring for them. The nightmares weren't gone. The trauma wasn't erased. I'd never fully trust people the way I once did. The innocence was gone forever. But I could be here, could be present, could love these children and show up for Thomas and build a relationship with Linda and teach business classes and consult for Coleman's auto service and drink coffee without terror. I could live, not the life I'd planned, not the 35-year marriage and the multi-million-dollar business, and the retirement with Elizabeth traveling to places we'd always meant to visit. A different life, smaller in some ways, bigger in others, more cautious but also more honest, built on actual trust, not assumed trust, built on people who'd proven themselves, not people I hoped would prove themselves. Emma ran over, breathless. "Grandpa, watch me on the slide." "I'm watching, sweetheart." She climbed to the top, waved, slid down laughing. Simple moment, ordinary moment. The kind of moment Elizabeth and Mark had tried to steal from me. They'd failed. That evening, after I'd returned the kids to Thomas and Sarah, I sat on my porch with Linda. She'd made dinner, pasta with vegetables, and we ate while rain drummed on the roof. "You're quiet tonight," she observed. "Hard day. Anniversary day. 5 years since my heart attack." She reached across the table, took my hand. "How are you feeling about that?" "Grateful, angry, sad, all of it." I squeezed her hand. 5 years ago, Elizabeth and Mark nearly succeeded. If I'd died 3 days into that coma, they'd have executed their plan, forged the will, stolen everything, moved on with their lives. No one would have known. "But you didn't die." "No. I woke up, and I fought back, and I won." I looked at her. But the cost was everything I thought my life was. My marriage, my business partner, my older son, my sense that people are fundamentally good. All of it gone. "And what did you gain?" The question surprised me. "Gain? You lost a lot, but you also gained things. What are they?" I thought about that. "Truth. I gained the truth about who people really were. I gained Thomas as a real relationship, not just an obligation. I gained the ability to be present for my grandchildren in a way I wasn't for my own kids because I was always working. I gained you. I gained clarity about what matters and what doesn't. And I gained survival. The knowledge that I'm strong enough to endure the worst betrayal imaginable and still be here, still functioning, still capable of love." Linda smiled. "That's not nothing. No, it's everything." We finished dinner, cleaned up together, the domestic choreography of a couple who'd learned each other's rhythms. She washed, I dried. Simple, peaceful. This was what remained when everything else was stripped away. Basic, human connection. Trust, built slowly through actions, not words. Presence, honesty, effort, not the grand romance of my 20s, not the comfortable partnership of 35 years of marriage. Something quieter, more fragile, more real. Before bed, I checked my email. One new message from Jennifer Park, the prosecutor who'd convicted Elizabeth and Mark. "David, I hope this finds you well. I'm writing with news about Elizabeth Coleman's case. She's filed for compassionate release, claims health problems, early release consideration. The Bureau of Prisons will review, but they've asked for victim input. You have the option to submit a statement supporting or opposing her release. Given her original 30-year sentence and the severity of her crimes, I personally doubt she'll be granted release, but stranger things have happened. Let me know if you want to submit a statement. No pressure either way. Jennifer, compassionate release. Elizabeth, 5 years into a 30-year sentence, asking to come home early." I stared at the email for a long time. Part of me wanted to write a scathing statement. to remind everyone what she'd done, how she'd tried to kill me, how 30 years wasn't nearly enough punishment. But another part of me, the part that had spent 5 years healing, wondered if it mattered. Elizabeth was 58. If she served her full sentence, she'd be 83 when released. Old, broken, institutionalized. Whether she served 25 more years or got out now, she'd never be the woman I married. Never be anything except a cautionary tale about greed and betrayal. Did I need her to suffer more? Would it help me heal? Would it undo the damage? No. Her continued imprisonment wasn't healing me, wasn't making me trust more, wasn't erasing the trauma. It was just punishment, and I'd stopped caring about punishment somewhere in the last 5 years. Stopped needing revenge, stopped requiring her suffering as payment for my pain. I typed a response to Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you for letting me know. I won't be submitting a statement either way. Elizabeth's sentence is between her and the justice system. I've moved on with my life. Whether she's in prison or out doesn't change what happened or how I've rebuilt. If she's released, I hope she uses whatever time she has left to reflect on her choices. If she stays in prison, I hope she finds whatever peace is possible there. Either way, she's not my concern anymore. David. I hit send and closed the laptop. Linda looked up from her book. Everything okay? Elizabeth's asking for early release, medical reasons. How do you feel about that? Nothing. I feel nothing. She's not my wife anymore. She's not my problem. She's just someone who once tried to kill me and failed. I got into bed, beside Linda. Whether she's in prison or out, I'm here. That's what matters. Linda kissed my forehead. You've come a long way, David Coleman. Long way from where? From the man Thomas described 5 years ago. Broken, traumatized, barely functioning. That man is gone. You're here instead. Was that true? Was the broken man gone? Or was he just better at pretending? Better at functioning despite the brokenness? Maybe both. Maybe healing wasn't about becoming unbroken. Maybe it was about learning to function, to love, to live while carrying brokenness. About accepting that trauma changes you permanently, but doesn't have to define you permanently. I was damaged, would always be damaged. The scars were permanent, but I was also here, alive, in love, grandfather to 2 beautiful children, friend to people who'd proven trustworthy, consultant to a business that bore my name, volunteer helping others build honest lives. The betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had refined me, burned away the naive trust, the assumptions, the comfortable illusions. What remained was harder, more cautious, more damaged, but also more real. Sunday morning, Thomas, Sarah, and the kids came over for breakfast. Our weekly tradition. Pancakes, fruit, too much coffee. Emma helped me flip pancakes standing on a stool at the stove. Grandpa, tell us about when you built your business. I've told you that story 100 times, sweetheart. Tell it again. So I did. The abbreviated version, suitable for 5-year-olds. How I'd started with one garage and a dream. How I'd worked hard and treated people fairly. How the business had grown over 40 years into something successful. I left out the part about Mark stealing nearly $1 million. Left out the poisoning, the trial, the convictions. They'd learn about that someday. Thomas would tell them when they were older. But not today. Today they just needed to know that Grandpa had built something good through honest work. That effort and integrity mattered. That success was possible without betrayal. Simple lessons for children, but also reminders for myself. After breakfast, we walked to the park. Thomas and I lagging behind while Sarah chased the kids. Dad, I'm proud of you, Thomas said. For what? For being here. For showing up every week. For being present for Emma and Jackson, in a way you couldn't always be present for Jason and me. He paused. I know that's hard to hear, but it's true. You were always working when we were kids. Always busy with the business. I was trying to provide. I know, and you did. We never wanted for anything material. But Dad, what Emma and Jackson have with you, that presence, that attention, Jason and I didn't always have that. You're a better grandfather than you were a father. And I'm glad. I'm glad they get the version of you that you became after everything fell apart. His words hurt, because they were true. I had been absent, had prioritized Coleman's auto service over family dinners and school events. had believed that providing financially was the same as providing emotionally. The betrayal had taught me otherwise, had shown me that all the money in the world meant nothing if the relationships were hollow. "I'm sorry," I said, "for not being there more when you were growing up. I know, and I forgive you. But Dad, don't waste time regretting the past. Emma and Jackson need the grandfather you are now. That's what matters." We watched the kids play. Emma on the swings, Jackson climbing, Sarah supervising, laughing at something Emma said. My family, not the family I'd planned. Not Elizabeth and 2 sons and a successful business. A different family, smaller, but real. "Thomas, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you think I did the right thing? Prosecuting your mother, testifying against her, sending her to prison for 30 years. He was quiet for a long moment. "Yes, even though she's your mother. She stopped being my mother when she tried to kill my father, when she conspired with Mark, stole money, administered poison. Mothers don't do that. Criminals do that." He looked at me. "She made choices. You responded to those choices. That's not vindictive. That's consequences. But 30 years. She got what she deserved. Maybe more than she deserved would have been a life sentence to match Mark's. But 30 years for attempting to murder your husband of 35 years. That's fair." He paused. "And Dad, even if you'd done nothing, even if you'd never prosecuted, the damage was done. Your marriage was over the moment she put poison in your coffee. Prosecution or no prosecution, you weren't getting that relationship back." He was right. Of course he was right. The betrayal had ended the marriage. The trial had just formalized it. "Do you talk to Jason?" I asked. "Occasionally. He's struggling. The publicity destroyed his reputation. He can't get legitimate work because everyone knows he was part of a federal fraud case. He's bitter, angry, blames everyone except himself. Does he ask about me? Every time. Wants to know if you'll ever forgive him, ever talk to him. I tell him I don't know. And what do you think? Should I forgive him?" Thomas watched his children play. "I think forgiveness is personal. I think Jason was young and stupid and manipulated by Mom. I think he deserves a chance at redemption. But I also think you have every right to never speak to him again. He betrayed you, whether he was manipulated or not. He took that money and stayed quiet. That's his weight to carry. Do you forgive him? I'm working on it. He's my brother. I want to forgive him. But Dad, I'm not the one he betrayed most. You are. My forgiveness doesn't erase what he did to you." We stood in silence, watching the next generation play. Innocent, unburdened by the betrayals of their elders. "I hope they never know this kind of pain," I said. "I hope they grow up in a world where people are honest, where trust means something. They will, because we'll teach them. You, me, Sarah, Linda. We'll show them that honesty and integrity matter. That betrayal has consequences. That family means showing up and being present, not just sharing DNA. Family means showing up and being present." That was the lesson Elizabeth and Mark and Jason had taught me through their absence, through their betrayal. That was the lesson I was determined to teach Emma and Jackson through my presence. The cycle had to break somewhere. Let it break with me. That night, alone in my study after Linda had gone to bed, I looked at the few photos I'd kept from the old life. My wedding day with Elizabeth. Both of us young, smiling, believing we'd found forever. Had she loved me then? Had it been real before it turned false? Or had I just been convenient? A hard-working man who'd provide security while she looked elsewhere for passion. I'd never know. A photo from Coleman's Auto Service's 10th anniversary. Me and Mark, arms around each other's shoulders, celebrating. Partners, friends, brothers in business. Had he been planning even then to steal from me? Or had the betrayal come later, after meeting Elizabeth, after opportunity met desire? I'd never know that either. A photo of Jason and Thomas as teenagers, both smiling, both seeming like good kids who'd grow into good men. One had, one hadn't. What made the difference? Parenting, character, luck, all of it, none of it? No answers. Just questions. Just memories of a life that had seemed solid but turned out to be built on sand. I put the photos away, closed the box. They were history, Important history, painful history, but history nonetheless. The present was downstairs in my bedroom. Linda, sleeping peacefully, trusting me enough to be vulnerable beside me. The present was 3 blocks away. Thomas, Sarah, Emma, Jackson. Family that showed up, that was present, that chose me every day. The present was the community center, where I taught business skills. The quarterly trips to San Diego to consult for Coleman's auto service. The therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez. The coffee I could make without terror. The present was survival that had become living. Trauma that had become wisdom. Betrayal that had become boundaries. The present was enough. 5 years since my heart attack. 5 years since Elizabeth tried to kill me. 5 years since everything fell apart. And here I was, 67 years old, in a house in Portland, in a relationship with a good woman, connected to a son who hadn't betrayed me, present for grandchildren who deserved better than I'd been capable of giving my own children. Not the life I'd planned. Better, in some ways. More honest, more real, built on actual trust instead of assumed trust, built on people who'd proven themselves instead of people I'd hoped would prove themselves. Worse, in other ways. The damage was permanent. The ability to trust unconditionally was gone forever. The nightmares persisted. The hypervigilance remained. But, on balance, worth it. I'd survived something that should have destroyed me. Had rebuilt when rebuilding seemed impossible. Had learned to love again when love felt like the riskiest thing in the world. If that wasn't victory, what was? Elizabeth was in prison. Mark was dead. Richard was in prison. Jason was exiled by his own choices. And I was here, alive, healing, present. That was justice. Not the courtroom kind, though that had happened too. The deeper kind. The kind where survival itself is revenge. Where living well is the ultimate victory. Where rebuilding is the most powerful statement you can make to people who tried to erase you. They'd tried to kill me. I'd refused to die. Not just physically, though that too, but emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. I'd refused to let their betrayal destroy my capacity for trust, for love, for connection. I'd refused to become bitter, isolated, broken. It had taken 5 years, thousands of hours of therapy, countless moments of doubt and despair, medications, support groups, Linda's patience, Thomas's presence, Dr. Martinez's guidance. But I'd done it. I'd survived. And more than that, I'd learned to live again. Not the old life. That was gone, erased by poison and betrayal. But a new life, harder, wiser, more careful, but also more real, more honest, more mine. I turned off the study light and went to bed. Linda stirred as I slipped under the covers. "You okay?" she murmured, half asleep. "Yeah, I'm okay." And for the first time in 5 years, I actually meant it. Not perfectly okay, not undamaged, not the same man who'd woken up 62 years old believing he had a solid marriage and a loyal business partner, but okay, present, alive, capable of love and trust and hope despite everything that had tried to destroy those capacities. The nightmares would come again. The hard days would return. The trauma was permanent, but so was the resilience. So was the healing. So was the knowledge that I'd faced the worst betrayal imaginable, and survived it. They'd tried to take everything. They'd failed. I was still here, and I'd won simply by refusing to let them destroy me. That was enough. That was everything. 5 years after David Coleman, 67, lives in Portland, Oregon. He consults for Coleman's auto service quarterly, teaches small business skills at a community center, and spends Sunday mornings with his grandchildren. He drinks coffee without fear most days. The nightmares come once or twice a month now. He's learning to trust again, slowly, carefully, with people who've earned it. Elizabeth Coleman, 58, is serving year 5 of a 30-year sentence at FCI Victorville. Her request for compassionate release was denied. She writes letters David doesn't read. She maintains she never intended to kill him. The jury disagreed. Mark Thornton died in federal prison at age 49. Cause of death, stabbing during a contraband dispute. He never admitted guilt, never showed remorse. His death certificate lists his occupation as business executive. It doesn't mention theft or conspiracy or attempted murder. Richard Holmes is serving year 5 of a 12-year sentence at FCI Sheridan. He'll be released at age 68. He writes to no one. His law license was revoked. His family visits occasionally. His sister's choices destroyed his career, his reputation, his life. He's learning that loyalty to family has limits. Jason Coleman lives in Arizona, working in real estate, struggling with a reputation tainted by association with federal crimes. He maintains contact with his brother Thomas. His father never responded to his letters. Some bridges stay burned. Some betrayals are permanent. Thomas Coleman, 34, lives in Portland with his wife Sarah and their children Emma and Jackson. He sees his father weekly, watches him heal slowly, hopes his children never know betrayal like their grandfather did, teaches them that family is about showing up, not just sharing blood. Coleman's Auto Service operates 4 locations in San Diego under new ownership, 28 employees who survived Mark Thornton's theft. The business bears David's name, the legacy he built, stripped of the people who tried to steal it. Honest work rewarded, betrayal punished, simple justice. And David, he drinks coffee. He loves his grandchildren. He trusts his partner.